StarCraft, the Terran Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76, the strongest SCV in history. Communication code 4476. Galaxy Hopper number 77. Please dock at Pier 11 of Port A. All personnel have been cleared. This is the Telesis second New Babylon space station. Salute the soldiers. A small spaceship landed at the top port of the space station, which was slowly rotating. When the spaceship's gangway opened, Augustus, dressed in a brown officer's uniform, walked down the spaceship, followed only by Jim Raynor, who was dressed in a soldier's uniform. The circulating air in the space station was abnormally dry, and the artificial gravity equivalent to 0.95 times the standard gravity held Augustus tightly. Several small and medium-sized interstellar spaceships were parked on the empty docking platform of Port A. The streamlined, graceful curves of these spaceships and the obvious traces of private modification showed the identity of their owners. A port bus floating above the ground picked up Augustus and Raynor and drove them to another dock. Along the way, Augustus saw many staff members and patrolling soldiers. Everyone here was very busy and didn't even have time to stop and say hello. When Augustus looked out, he could see the dark black starry sky and a satellite in the distance. He was curious about how to prevent air and maintain stable air pressure in such a situation. When Augustus saw his brother Augustus Mengsk, who had announced his retirement, the latter was lying under the belly of a medium-sized galaxy jumper, wearing thick coarse cloth insulating gloves to sort out the tangled and unnecessary wires of various colors. Augustus was no longer wearing his neat officer uniform with large bronze epaulettes. Instead, he was wearing a standard mine worker uniform, thick textile trousers, a multi-pocket orange jacket and a pair of sturdy and reliable boots, with a huge power wrench tied around his waist. Several people dressed in the same clothes as Augustus were busy driving a 16-foot tall space construction engineering vehicle into the cargo hold of the Galaxy Jumper. Augustus, before I leave, it's great to see you. Augustus heard Augustus talking to Raynor, and when he was about to get up, he hit his head on the metal bottom plate of the spacecraft. Augustus and Raynor grabbed Augustus's feet and dragged him out from under the spaceship. He sat down next to his brother and said, "Why do you do this kind of work? Professional mechanics can do more than you can. That costs a lot of money." Augustus sat up, wiped the oil stains on his clothes, and wanted to hug his brother but was pushed away by Augustus, and his brother's face suddenly showed a sad expression. It costs a lot of money to buy equipment and spaceships, hire technical experts, workers and even security forces to deal with the pirates of the Kel-morians. I have saved money for more than 10 years just to make a big business in the mining area. Augustus said, "Everything must be calculated carefully to ensure that every penny is spent in the right place. You will succeed. My brother Augustus Mengsk will become a great man." Augustus said. Augustus couldn't help but laugh. He didn't care much about the praise of most people in this world because he thought it was what he deserved. Only the praise from his parents and the admiration from his brothers and sisters could make Augustus proud. The blood relationship between family members always made a lonely person like him feel warm. At this time, Augustus was already 28 years old. Augustus could already see some white hair on his head, but it was far less than their father Angus. Augustus was more and more like Angus. He had already grown into a mature man, and that might be what Augustus would look like in 10 years. But Augustus didn't think so. He was still very young, but he had never imagined what he would look like in the future. Compared with Augustus, Augustus looked more like his mother and was more handsome. He might not become a bearded uncle in the future. "Do you really think I can succeed?" Augustus smiled and said, "Except for those old subordinates who have followed me since I was a non-commissioned officer, no one understands me. So I told them that I was tired of war and no longer believed in the meaning of what we once fought for. I can invest in your team. In the future, if you discover Summerdine crystal deposits that are so large that you can't spend it in your lifetime, just give me a little bit of it." Augustus said. Haha, although I'm confident in my surveying skills and intuition, Such mineral deposits are hard to come by, and my luck will never be that good. Arcturus laughed even louder. I know you just want to find an excuse to share the pressure with me, but I have watched you grow up. Don't I know that you have no habit of saving money at all? Every time you buy a ceramic piggy bank with more than 10 credit coins, you swear to save them for a year before opening it, but just after putting a few dollars in it, you smash the piggy bank again the next day. I don't know what you are trying to do. I have about 20 million credit coins in my hand now. Augustus said, I know your account number. There is no need to refuse, because I won't listen. What trouble have you caused? Where did you get so much money? Arcturus suddenly grabbed the clothes on Augustus' chest and shook it back and forth. Crime? Don't hide it from me. I'll support you if the sky falls. Could it be that my mother gave it to me? That's possible, but my mother stopped giving me money after I became an adult. Not counting what mom gave me, I have so much. Augustus, who was being tossed around by his brother, had a look of despair on his face. You know, my heavenly demons can actually be considered an independent organization. Compared to other regular army units, we are more free and flexible. My troops have taken over many bases of the Kel-morians and made a lot of money. Not bad. If I weren't already the division commander, I would also like to lead the frontline troops to reap the spoils. Many people are rich as hell. Take what you can. There's no need to leave it to those in the military system and let them be greedy. Arcturus said, but it is risky. You have to be careful. If something goes wrong, Warfield and others will help you solve it, and more than half of the officers of the 33rd Ground Assault Division will cover you. During the war, there were many loopholes in the military system. I have studied it carefully, and one of the loopholes is that only the spoils that have been entered into the database one by one are considered to be materials that are absolutely not allowed to be stolen in the army. So, we just need to report less. But they will wake up sooner or later. Augustus said. But I can't stay in the army for long. I'll let those misers get upset when I leave. Is Angus forcing you to go home? Don't pay attention to him. He's a selfish guy. Arcturus frowned. It seems that you don't know what will happen in Korhal IV. Angus said that an independence referendum will be held in April next year, announcing that the entire planet will be separated from the rule of the federal government. Augustus said seriously, do you know what that means? Arcturus almost gritted his teeth and uttered a word. War. At that time, I will definitely return to Korhal, because my mother and Dorothy need me. You. Augustus hesitated. No, I once vowed to break away from Angus's control. I despise this meaningless revolution that will inevitably fail. Arcturus said, thousands of people will die because of Angus's revolution, and the patriarch of the autocratic family will only say that it is a necessary sacrifice. No, I won't go back. Never. If one day I need your help. Augustus lowered his eyes and asked softly, my brother, will you come back to me? I'm still coding the next 2 chapters. Chapter 77 Meinhof. Meinhof is a mining planet of the Kel-morian Federation. Whether viewed from synchronous orbit or on the holographic star map of the Swan family's dilapidated, oil-stained observatory in the New Apolloan community, this dark blue planet is featureless, with canyons and gullies rooted like scars in its dark brown land, and the land is as poor as a bare stone in the universe. It orbits an equally featureless main sequence star, and the young sun always rises slowly. In this barren land, its light cannot even nourish the crops of the Kel-morians. Only precious crops grow in the cultivation room. Young Rory Swan always has an inexplicable expectation for the fireball hanging high above Mrs. Meinhof's head, thinking that it can bring some beautiful things, such as mountains, rivers, forests, and grasslands that do not exist on this planet. But as the old saying of the Kel-morians goes, the uglier the appearance, the richer the content. Meinhof is actually a good place. There are gas refineries, mines, processing plants, oil refineries and communities of all sizes inhabited by families with the same surname between the mountains and plains. Swan rarely sees the sun, which is called fire snake by the residents of the New Apolloan community. Like the men in other communities, he went to work in the mines at the age of 16 and is now a skilled and experienced miner. In Meinhof, all work is inseparable from mining. Food, daily necessities and even water resources are largely dependent on imports. especially today when war sucks the blood of all Kel-morians. Swan and his fathers and cousins must work twice as hard as before to earn bread to feed their families. Before the sun rises, Swan has to put on his work clothes and boots and take the elevator from a bottomless mine into the pit. He drives the Kel-morian mining robot in the dusty and low-quality crystal tunnels and uses a power drill to dig out the crystals from the mine and send them to the road car in the tunnel. Workers have to work for 12 hours every day until the next shift of workers to replace them goes down the mine, and the sun has already set by then. Swan gets up in the dim morning and goes down the mine and returns home late at night. He has not seen the sun for several months and his scarred skin has become white. Rory Swan wiped the dust off the old machine with a rag that is not much cleaner than the family's only observatory, and then put the insulated lunchbox he brought on the flat console, thinking about how his Uncle Edward would scold him. But it doesn't matter, let him pull his beard in anxiety. Swan will apologize to him after he has eaten and drunk enough. Swan opened the lunchbox and sighted the food inside: 2 fried bread slices, a small spoonful of butter and a palm-sized Moria avocado. It was noon now, and he had to rely on these things to survive until the evening. Although life was hard and entertainment was pitiful, Swan did not complain about himself. On the contrary, he always enjoyed it. This was not to say that Swan was used to endurance, but because he preferred to live with his family and other family members. The Swan family was a united family. Like other families in Kel-morian, helping each other was their tradition. A few slices of bread didn't feel much. When Swan stood up again, his rumbling stomach and cramping calves were undoubtedly protesting to him, but he had to return to his post immediately. He packed everything in a dozen seconds and prepared to walk to his mining robot parked not far away. The Kel-morian mining robot is tracked and only 12 feet tall. The 2 mechanical arms controlled by joysticks can be replaced with power drills, laser drills, engineering clamps and plasma welding guns, and are fueled by high-energy gas. Swan's mining robot looks larger than others, with more obvious but unknown parts. There is also an extra mechanical arm, 2 thrusters and matching engines on the back of the robot. With this robot, Swan can complete the work faster and better. The fuel cost is of course higher, but it is worth it compared to the increased efficiency. When necessary, this robot can even be equipped with power hammers and machine guns. Swan has never touched anything other than automatic rifles and electromagnetic guns, but he thinks that they will not be difficult for him. Although Rory Swan does not think he is different from others, he is undoubtedly the most talented genius mechanic and inventor in the entire Swan family and even in New Apolloan. Swan does not like to deal with people very much. He is always used to burying his head in doing his own things and likes tools that others think are boring. He likes to get his hands dirty with oil. Nothing is more beautiful than the sound of gears turning and machinery running. Swan is keen on disassembling, repairing, and reassembling equipment. The hard life forces him to innovate constantly and use various inventions to make life better for himself and his family. Laurie, come and fix the magnetic resonance machine. A strong and powerful voice echoed in the empty mine. I'll be there soon. I hope that thing can hold up before I come. It's hard to say. The second half of Swan was almost talking to himself. Just as Swan was about to walk towards the direction of the sound, suddenly, the observatory next to him, which had not moved for at least 20 years, seemed to jump up and emit a flickering red light. Swan's short but strong body immediately pounced on the control console. He didn't know what it meant, but it was definitely not good news. The history of this observatory is, as long as the Swan family, it is connected to the earliest artificial satellite in the Meinhof synchronous orbit and detects the routes in the entire galaxy through a relatively primitive radar system. Usually, on certain days of the month, holographic projections of several Kel-morian galaxy cargo ships would suddenly appear on this observatory. These holographic projections, which looked like scaled-down models, were green, representing friendly forces. During the colonial period, the first generation of Meinhof used this observatory to get in touch with the supply fleet responsible for delivering necessary materials and mining facilities to the colonists. At the same time, this observatory was also responsible for monitoring enemy fleets within the galaxy, but it was never used. At this time, the Kel-morian pirates were basically their own people. Swan hoped that this Grandma generation machine was just having a seizure, but the 3 slowly moving Behemoth-class battle cruisers on the holographic projection and the other 2 warships that were jumping in instantly shattered his hopes. The holographic light and shadow that made up them were dangerous red. The Tyranids are coming. Chapter 78 Iron Justice. Meinhof's mines are connected by intricate underground tunnels. Rails are laid inside the tunnels. Maglev mine cars are used to transport ore and personnel. Mining lamps and air composition detection instruments are embedded on the walls of the mines. Ventilation ducts bring outside air into the mines. Here, the hum of the fan is like the sound of an electric drill. It never stops. Just as the red light of the observatory flashed, the alarm inside the mine sounded. It was a sharp and harsh metal rubbing sound, enough to give people goosebumps. Pick up your pick and hoe and gather at the foreman closest to you. All mine supervisors, stay at your posts. A mechanical voice echoed in the mine. The Tyranid fleet is approaching Meinhof, but we will repel them. Swan wanted to take the toolbox he brought down, but after a little thought, he chose the lunchbox and then climbed onto his mining robot with solid steps. The density of miners in the mine was not high, and Swan had to drive the robot to the next mine to see other miners. But thinking that this observatory was the most valuable asset of the family, Swan decided to stay in front of the observatory. Of course, another reason was that he really wanted to know the situation of the battle in the synchronous orbit. The holographic projection on the observatory jumped again, and the green warships representing their own warships appeared. 2 Hephaestus-class Kel-morian battleships that were benchmarked against the Terran Federation's Behemoth-class battle cruisers. This 2,000-foot-long giant battleship was designed and manufactured based on the Federation's battleships, so it was very similar in appearance, design and bridge position. The biggest difference was that there were more electromagnetic gun turrets, more laser gun groups, and more missile and space torpedo launch bays, and some battleships would also be equipped with electromagnetic interference weapons. But like other weapons and warships of Kel-morian, traces of stitching can be seen on Kel-morian's warships, and the armor materials and levels are also uneven. In Swan's eyes, he even felt that these warships were directly modified from the Titan-class transport ships of the Kellenis Transport Guild in the dock of the starport, but this did not prevent him from being proud of these warships. The real scene of the fleet battle could not be seen on the old observation platform, but Swan could imagine such a scene. The warship opened the dock, and the Cerberus and Skywolf aircraft swarmed out. Their opponents were the Avengers and the latest Wraith fighters of the Terrans. The battleships fired at each other, and the orange-yellow laser beams and the light of missile explosions ignited the deep space. Like other members of his family, Swan was impatient. Swan had no patience for anything other than machinery and technology. He was worried about his own fleet, and his inner irritability and worry were completely reflected in his hands, which had nowhere to put. The Kel-morian fleet was at a great disadvantage, and the Terran Federation had 7 Behemoth-class and 4 Leviathan battle cruisers, and the enemy had an absolute advantage. The observatory's old database could only parse out the names of its own warships and 2 Leviathan-class battle cruisers, which had participated in the military parade in the capital of the Terran Federation more than a decade ago. Meinhof's people had never expected that the war would affect this mining planet with a population of only a few million, and Meinhof was close enough to the mother planet Moria compared to other planets in Kel-morian. The Terran Federation fleet would never have appeared in the heart of the Kel-morian Federation before today, unless Kel-morian was retreating, unless the fleet was no longer able to control the distant star systems. Due to extremely strong interference, the holographic projection on the observatory appeared and disappeared from time to time, and was extremely unstable. The broadcast sounded more than a dozen times in a row, but Swan still sat in the driver's seat of the mining robot and watched everything. The first ship to be kicked out of the battlefield was the Kel-morian battleship. After a flash of garbled code, it broke into several pieces. Part of the wreckage was pulled to the ground by the gravity of the planet, and flew towards the edge of the observatory like an eggshell exploding in slow motion. How many people will die? Swan thought of this question in sadness. A capital ship usually carries 1,000 to 3,000 fleet soldiers. Although most of these people are Moria soldiers, he still feels sad for them. Another Kel-morian battlecruiser seemed to be injured. Swan knew the name of this battleship and was very familiar with it. It was the starport of Meinhof that forged this battleship. It was also the only battleship built on this planet during the war. Most of the soldiers were directly recruited from Meinhof, including the mechanics of the Swan family. In despair and the belief of defending their homeland to the death, this battleship tried to ram the flagship of the Terran Federation fleet. This was indeed the last helpless move, but it was actually difficult to do. This is not the sea surface. Space is a three-dimensional battlefield. The Kel-morian warships were slower than the earliest Leviathan-class battlecruisers of the Terran Federation. Both the Kel-morian and the Umayan warships were at least one generation behind the Terran Federation, which was the first to enter space. No miracles happened, and the remaining warships stopped moving before approaching the enemy ship. In the holographic projection, the Federation fighters and boarding ships were surrounding the motionless steel giant, like flies on a dead body. It was all over. Meinhof had no orbital defense platforms and anti-aircraft gun clusters that could shoot down enemy ships in low Earth orbit. These two warships and their affiliated fleets were the only defense force of the planet in outer space. In Swan's sad eyes, 3 Behemoth-class battlecruisers broke away from their mother fleet and accelerated towards Meinhof. Although Swan didn't know much about military and strategy, he could almost imagine what these warships would do next. The few military fortresses on this planet would be destroyed by nuclear bombs dropped from high-altitude orbit before the Terran landing forces landed on the ground, and then the Terran Marines would land in various cities. It is more beneficial for the Terran Federation to occupy Meinhof than to completely destroy it, so they will not destroy everything. The Terrans' target is the mining companies on this planet and the Adene crystal mines piled up in the mines and ports. While Swan is feeling fear, he is also worried about his relatives and friends in the new Apolloan community. In the propaganda of the representatives of the Union, the Terrans are undoubtedly unforgivable. They are the most greedy people in the entire Korhal sector. The workers of the Terran Federation are always exploited and squeezed, while the interests of the Kel-morian working class are protected by the Union. This is indeed true. In the past 10 years, the mines built on the marginal worlds far away from Moria have been forcibly occupied by the Terran Federation. In recent years, the Terrans, who have become more and more aggressive, are even ready to encroach on the mining industry within the territory of the Kel-morian Federation. If the Kel-morian Federation chooses to swallow its anger, it will not take a few years, and under the encroachment of the Terran Federation, their sphere of influence will slowly retreat to their home planet Moria. In the eyes of all Kel-morians, the Federation was forced to declare war. They fought entirely to protect the unions and mining companies oppressed by the Terran Federation. Almost everyone was part of the Union, and they were of course fighting for themselves. The 3 battle cruisers, the dark blue Meinhof, came closer, and some tiny points of light fell from the battleships like shining powder, and fell into the planet. They were the Terran airborne troop ships, and landing crafts full of Marines. Swan saw the name of one of the Federation battle cruisers, after updating the observatory database. Iron Justice. The end of the 3rd update. Thanks to tomorrow to cure procrastination, B and Z. Command Aish, Lazy Reader, Glory to the Eldest Son, Xi Jinping, XMD01, Protus Archbishop Artemis, and Fengaiman Shannon for their monthly tickets. Thanks to Eden-class world ship, Black Watch Senior Commander, Protus Archbishop Artemis, Command Aish, Big Cat Who Fears Water. Oh, what a tragedy. Eden-class world ship for the reward. Chapter 79. We stepped into the death zone. The Iron Justice is a Behemoth-class battlecruiser of the Terran Federation. This 1,500-foot-long steel giant has more than 20 sets of cannons, laser pulse cannons, and laser dot matrix defense turrets accelerated by magnetic coils. A huge Colossus reactor provides energy for the life support and weapon systems of the entire battleship. These warships armed with thick fine steel armor and heavy cannons are like mobile fortresses cast in steel. In wartime, they are the general command center of the Terran Federation fleet and the commander, and in peacetime, they are the extension of the federal government, to demonstrate its military power. Augustus, wearing a black and grey power armor, walked on the corridor of the Iron Justice from the crew cabin to the launch cabin, followed by the first squad of the Heavenly Demons. The clicking sound of the power boots echoed on the corridor walls with cold lines and simple and practical shapes. Once we take down Minhof, Kel-morian will not be far from surrendering. It's October now, and there are still 2 months left. We can go back home by Christmas. Jim Raynor was talking on the first shift's communication channel about something that had nothing to do with the landing mission. I really want to see my mom and dad. I hope our heifer is not pregnant yet. Billy's old bull always has bad intentions. Jim, don't you know that reality often doesn't go your way? Ty just cursed. We all know that the goddess of luck is a bitch who will only open her crotch to the enemy. I have read the mission briefing carefully. Minhof is not defenseless, Runstein said in the communication channel, and our commander is obviously only deploying troops based on outdated intelligence provided by spies. The war situation changes rapidly. Who knows if we will fall into the hands of tens of thousands of fully armed Kel-morian rippers. The generals are accustomed to launching wars strictly according to their plans. I just hope that their battle plans are formulated after careful consideration and repeated revisions. If it were me, you are just a soldier, a land. Wait until you become a general. Josephine said, even I can see that the higher-ups are not very interested in this broken stone in the universe. What they want is resources. We are robbers and we will run away after robbing things. Has anyone seen my peanut butter, little Amy? Hannock asked in a low voice in the channel. You always leave things everywhere. The last time I saw it, it was in your stinky socks. Amy Brandon complained. I'm not your mother. Sometimes I really wonder if you can't live without me. I really can't live without peanut butter. Hannock's voice sounded like he was dying. Amid the complaints and chatter of his subordinates, Augustus turned into another more open corridor and entered the launch bay full of ozone and oil. Ground crew members in orange uniforms ran around the transport planes, and landing craft parked on the docking platform. Technicians surrounded the damaged Avenger fighters, and the light of welding torches kept flashing. A battalion of Marines was lining up to board 4 landing craft with round bellies. Ground crew members wearing bright orange nylon hats were busy removing the cables that secured the ships. The Heavenly Demon had its own dedicated transport ship, which was a newly completed Apod 46 transport ship built by Bennett Shipyard in Tarsenus. Augustus and his men spent more than a week repainting the transport ship, painting the hooded skull of the Heavenly Demon and the Crimson Cross on its black-grey hull. More than 40 Heavenly Demons wanted to give the ship a unique name, but they argued for a weekend and could not reach a consensus, so Augustus decided to call it the Little Demon. Harnack's Red Demon plan was ruthlessly rejected. He doubted whether Augustus would call it the Big Demon if the Heavenly Demon had a larger battleship. Augustus's troops did not wait long to board their own transport ship. The pilot was a pilot named Jack, who used to fly supply barges between the space station and the ground for a private airline. The Heavenly Demon's armor technician Fick did not follow them, but stayed on the mid-spine deck of the battleship with other workers to repair the damaged cables. The Little Demon was soon sent into deep space by the electromagnetic launcher of the launch bay. This ship built at the end of the Kalian War had more functions than the old ones. Each seat had a data cable that plugged into the power armor, and the HUD on the Marines' visors was connected directly to the ship's detectors. Augustus' HUD had 6 different screens, allowing him to see both the pilot's perspective and the orange-red tail flames at the rear of the ship. Hundreds of transport ships and landing craft, covered by Avengers and Wraiths, fell into Minhof's much thinner atmosphere than other colony planets. As it passed through the atmosphere, a layer of flames adhered to the imp's hull, and the plasma flames of the thrusters became more brilliant. From Augustus' perspective, the ship seemed to have become a fire-bathed phoenix falling to the earth. More and more phoenixes were falling from the deep blue dome of Minhof behind Augustus. When the imp landed at an altitude of 8,000 feet, Augustus could see the Kel-morian hellhounds rushing towards them like angry wasps. At first there were only a few dozen, but the number increased exponentially over time. The fighters of both sides opened fire at the same time. In the corner of Augustus's eye, a laser beam brushed the tail of the imp and hit an Apod 33 transport ship behind, which immediately turned into a ball of fire. A large transport ship carrying a company of soldiers collided head-on with another hellhound, and all the people on it had no chance of survival. During the long time, when the spacecraft was getting closer and closer to the ground, Augustus saw more than 20 landing ships being destroyed by machine guns, missiles, and even suicide attacks by Kel-morian fighters. But the imp was lucky enough that the enemy had not yet targeted it. When on the battlefield, Augustus had this feeling more than once, that his life and death were not in his own control, and it was completely dependent on whether the enemy's bullets and shells would suddenly fall on his head. At this time, Augustus could do nothing, and he missed the feeling of his feet standing firmly on the ground. Just as Augustus could see the dark brown mountains of Meinhof and the black domed town of Kel-morian in the distance, a Kel-morian hellhound caught up with them. It had already used up all its missiles, and was firing at the little devil with 2 sets of air-to-air laser cannons on the nose. In order to escape the pursuit, the pilot Jack deviated from the scheduled route and flew towards the mountains instead of the Kel-morian city. On Augustus' HUD display, the constantly jumping numbers showed that they were getting farther and farther away from the scheduled landing point, the new Apolloan mine. Half a pigeon. Chapter 80 Titus's opinion. The twin-engine jet fighters of the Kel-morian followed the dark Apod 46 transport ship Imp, and the orange laser beams passed by the side. Jack's spaceship narrowly avoided the attack after several difficult evasive maneuvers. The black-gray spaceship flew close to the land of the same color as Meinhof, passing over the jagged rocky beaches and dry canyon rivers, while the Cerberus fighter with golden-red stripes followed closely behind and above, like a falcon hovering over its prey. This is the transport ship App 404, calling the escort formation, requesting support. Augustus could hear the pilot's voice in the communication channel. Jack's call for help was quickly responded to. A CF-17 Wraith fighter turned from high altitude and locked onto the Cerberus fighter chasing Imp. 2 Gemini air-to-air missiles popped out of the missile bay under the wing, dragging long plasma flames and wide condensate trails towards the enemy aircraft. Amid the cheers of the demons of heaven, the hellhound that followed them like a death god exploded. The little demon turned again and flew towards the designated landing point, flying over the dark brown wasteland without any greenery and the hills of coal slag and slag, which looked like the termite nests on the African continent. Some cranes and smaller trucks that looked like toy models from this height were parked next to these hills. The workers on the ground had long since abandoned their tools and ran away. A signal tower used to indicate the direction of vehicles when a storm came stood alone between the hills. Beyond this group of hills, a group of dark black buildings suddenly appeared on Augustus' HUD display. The dense spires and arched windows looked like conches and glowing shells on the beach in the sun. Unlike the grid-like town buildings and dome-shaped cubic houses of the Terran Federation colonies, the buildings of the Kel-morians are more distinctive. They use cut marble and simple, but beautiful cubic stone columns to build their castle-like family residences. The buildings next to each other have extremely high domes and multifaceted small windows. Brick courtyards separate the large clans, and several miles of high walls block the entire New Apolloan community from the wind, sand, and beasts of the outside world. 2 black satellite communication spires are like 2 tentacles on the horizon. Several Kel-morian spacecraft are taking off or landing, looking like black dots rising and falling in the distance. Old Jack, drive steadily, don't rush. Raynor complained in the internal channel of the transport ship. To be honest, I'm about to vomit. How about you come? Jack said slowly. That shouldn't be difficult. I've driven a spaceship in the holographic simulation cabin of the Iron Justice, and my score has always been the highest. Raynor was eager to try. That's what you said. I'll drive the ship back next time. I bet I'm only 1 step away from getting a pilot's license. Oh, then I'm afraid you'll have to drive the ship back alone, Jim, because no one dares to sit on it. Titus cheesed. It's time to land. Get ready, boys. Jack laughed. You're about to land. The Kel-morians of the New Apolloan town community had obviously discovered the approaching transport ship through their radar. The anti-aircraft missiles had already been launched, and the little devil had to land in a depression 2 miles away from this Kel-morian residential community. Driven by the hydraulic device, the gangway slowly unfolded, and Augustus was the first to walk down from the spaceship, holding the electromagnetic rifle in his hand, to observe the surrounding terrain. The black and grey power-armored heavenly demons filed down from behind him. I think we should add a stealth module to the little devil. Augustus said as he directed others to cover the spacecraft with a camouflaged environmental simulation curtain. In this way, at least today we will definitely not be targeted by that annoying hellhound. Do you think the 4th class Marines are still qualified to enjoy this kind of treatment? They didn't let us fight in open crotch pants, which is worthy of the taxpayers' money. Titus poured cold water on Augustus. After a month of getting along, Titus Finley gradually gained Augustus' trust and integrated into this special tactical force little by little. The hooded sculptor 2 of the Heavenly Devil closely linked everyone together. Of course, that was the opinion of others. For Titus, a veteran, these people were just another group of passers-by in his fleeting military career, a group of not-so-stupid comrades. In the past, Titus was not so keen on integrating into the group. He was always used to being a lone ranger. Titus didn't have many friends, because he always didn't trust others. Even when doing business, Titus would try to make money through the least number of people and the most convenient channels. The more people cooperate, the more money will be shared. Titus Finley is happy to hang out with the devils of heaven and chat with them occasionally, because their boss Augustus Mengsk is a money maker. Most importantly, Augustus is quite generous to his own people. Titus has never seen a gangster boss or smuggler give so much money to his subordinates and only take a small part for himself, as if he doesn't care about money at all. And such people are like elegant nobles in the slums and saints in brothels. They can't exist in this world. Such people are worthy of Titus's following. No real man with blood and backbone like him would have trouble with money. Generally speaking, Titus always likes to work alone and only do jobs that make money quickly. If he wants him to carry a bag to work, it would be better for him to be a maid serving plates or cut cakes elegantly in a backless evening dress. Titus rarely stays loyal to everyone, and the boss who is loyal and willing to put money in his pocket is an exception. Augustus seems to understand what Titus wants. Titus always feels a little weird when he recalls the first time he met Augustus. Augustus seemed to see through what kind of person Titus is at a glance and cater to his preferences. Titus is sure that he has never met Augustus, but the kind of person who can see through others at a glance does not exist in reality. It should only appear in electronic novels or novel biographies of great people with exaggerated words. Titus knows that those successful generals or financial giants will ask writers to write their autobiographies in their later years, and he firmly believes that Augustus will not be a person who will be unknown for life. In the long future, how will the person who writes the book about Augustus describe the first meeting between the great bandit Titus Finley and his legend? I will find someone to modify it sooner or later. Our power armor, Mr. Fick, is not good at modifying things other than armor and weapons. Augustus mailed the environmental simulation curtain into the hard soil of Meinhof with dozens of inches long and thick nails. The Heavenly Devil, who had followed Augustus for a long time, knew that he would never give up. Before completing this task, Hannock lacked patience and persistence in most things, while Augustus was just the opposite. Thanks to the rewards of sacred and discipline, Agent Rangrong, Commander Aish, Book Friend 2020005042517217, and the rural cat downstairs. Thanks to Luoxu, Jasmine, AIUR will be redeemed. Northern Warwolf, XMD01 Salted Fish has not turned over. Clement 001, Heartless, Leisurely Xiaomi Qi Xingping, Wuxun, Irida, Luoxu, Jasmine, Northern Warwolf, Agent Rangrong, and XMD01 for their monthly tickets. Chapter 81 The First Ceasefire Agreement. According to the scheduled combat deployment, Augustus's Heavenly Demon Special Tactical Platoon walked to the assembly point in the mission briefing. After hiding the spacecraft, leaving 2 Heavenly Demons and the driver Jack to guard the spacecraft. This hemisphere of Meinhof is as desolate as the moon, and the wind mixed with gravel and gravel erodes the rocks with severe weathering marks on the surface. At this latitude, the change of seasons is not obvious. The night is dry and cold, and the fragile skin often dries and cracks. When the sun rises, the temperature rises too high and too fast, so the houses here emphasize airtight insulation. The original modular prefabricated panel buildings were soon replaced by Meinhof's characteristic stone buildings. The vast plains with no shelter and the end can be seen at a glance are not common here. Mountains, low hills, and highlands of not large areas and the depressions and valleys between them constitute the main landforms of this area. The CMC-300 power armor that the Augustus troops replaced half a month ago can easily cope with this complex terrain. The altitude, temperature, air pressure and other data on the HUD display on the helmet mask are constantly jumping. A slowly rotating three-dimensional topographic map uses green dots to represent friendly troops that have landed. The black and grey armor of the Heavenly Demon is a good protective color on the Meinhof. It is difficult for the Kel-morian fighters in the sky to notice the small-scale troops moving thousands of feet below. Augustus was not the first to arrive at the assembly point. A resocialization platoon was already waiting there. Gathering together in the battle with the Kel-morian was equivalent to stupidity. Fighters and missiles were enough to accurately destroy a large-scale army that was gathering from a few miles away. After a brief exchange with the commander of the resocialization force, Augustus pulled away a certain distance and ordered his subordinates to crawl in the depressions and rocks in a dispersed manner. Warfield, who had been fighting side by side with the Heavenly Demon, did not get off the ship and go to the front line in person. The responsibility of coordinating the overall situation required him to stay on the ship. Because the commander of the 33rd Ground Assault Division and several senior officers suddenly retired before the start of this campaign, a group of brave and meritorious officers like Warfield were promoted continuously within a month. Now he is a lieutenant colonel, serving as the deputy captain of the battlecruiser Iron Justice, with a newly established Marine Brigade under his command, whose troops mainly come from Antigua Prime and marginal worlds such as the Serra system. In mid-October 2488, the situation of the Kalian War has become clear. The Kel-morians have lost control of their once huge and invincible mining empire, and the Terran Federation is winning the war. The battles launched by the Kel-morians on many planets have all failed. These battles, which lasted for several years, ended with the victory of the Terran Federation army. A large number of Kel-morian troops were annihilated in an orderly manner, and the remaining troops retreated to the core territory of the Federation. The Terran Federation has recovered almost all of its lost territory. The fierce counterattack that followed wiped out the last remaining dignity of the Union government. Several planets with a population of more than 1 million were destroyed by nuclear bombs, and more marginal mining planets fell. Although the sudden retirement of a group of senior officers at this time was indeed very surprising, there were many people who were overjoyed. Some officers who were of noble origin, but extremely incompetent in the war, were gloating because of jealousy, while others were considering whether they should take this opportunity to fabricate more merits, to share the extra cake. After a series of reviews by the Federal Central Security Bureau, the Federal Intelligence Bureau headquarters, and the Tarsana Secret Police, Arcturus and his followers retired smoothly without too many twists and turns. Augustus speculated that the application of multiple technologies, such as the full deployment of CMC-250 and CMC-300 power armor, the large-scale production and service of the Wraith fighter, the new round of transformation of the Arclight main battle tank, and the whole brigade of resocialized soldiers who were fearless and fearless, were the important reasons for the defeat of Kel-morian. The main reason is the size gap. The Terran Federation has far more colonies and population than the Kel-morian Federation, and is at an advantage both economically and militarily. If it weren't for the fact that the old aristocratic officers of the Federation, who had never experienced war, were caught off guard by the Kel-morians' tough and decisive offensive in the early stages of the war, and that most of the Kel-morian were brave and good at fighting, the Battle of the Kel-morian Federation should not have dragged on for so long. When another company of the 33rd Ground Assault Division arrived, Augustus went with them to a Kel-morian industrial park that the fleet command had set up to capture. They climbed up a high ground in front of the assembly point and ran about a mile south. A huge cluster of industrial buildings and towering furnaces built on the mountain appeared in Augustus's eyes. Unlike residential buildings, Kel-morian's factory buildings are mostly geometric buildings with simple lines, rectangular industrial plants built of cold gray steel plates and cylindrical condensation towers. Geometric buildings of varying heights were stacked on the hillside, and the outermost wall was covered with electrified barbed wire. Large crystals mined from nearby mines were transported to the industrial zone via the mine rails, and the Khazadian crystals were finally loaded onto trucks and transported to the ground launch port of Minhof. Before the three forces launched their attack, the bomber formations of the Terran Federation had destroyed the few bunkers and defense facilities in the industrial complex. According to intelligence, there were no Kel-morian defenders here, and the workers must have been evacuated in advance, so Augustus and others only needed to occupy an unmanned factory. It sounds simple, but based on past experience, all the commanders above the platoon level present believed that they would definitely encounter resistance. After discussing with several other lieutenants, Augustus decided to abandon the original battle plan, bypass the main gate of the industrial park, and directly blow up the wall to attack from two other directions. Augustus's heavenly demons attacked from the south. After Xander used explosives to blow down a section of the wall, the first squad was the vanguard to break in. But the intelligence this time proved to be quite reliable. Not only were there no resistance troops inside, but there were no human figures. Before getting off the ship, they heard that the Kel-morians would fight to the death when their homes were invaded, and it was common for an entire family of men to die in battle. But now they have handed over the entire industrial park. These groundhogs who can only hide in pits and dig crystals are afraid. Josephine, who was standing next to a centrifuge room, said with contempt, "I'm afraid. Things are more complicated than you think." Renault pointed to the wall behind him. Josephine turned around and saw a holographic projection screen on the wall that was repeatedly playing a certain video. The video has no sound, only a subtitle that keeps scrolling. After consultation with the independent government, the Moria Workers Union unanimously decided to agree to the Terran Federation's comprehensive ceasefire agreement that will take effect at 8 AM on October 30th. This will be the first ceasefire agreement since 2485. The agreement will last for one standard Earth month, and oh damn it, it seems that I said it too early. We can go home next month. Raynor shook his head. Is the war over? Titus was disappointed because his chances of making a fortune were greatly reduced. Cheer up, Titus, Augustus said, looking at the glittering Adian crystals that had not yet been transported away from the factory. We are now an occupying force. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82, Opening a Branch Mine. The arched windows of the new Apolloan Mining Industrial Zone Supervisory Office facing the mine shaft were all open, and the morning breeze blew in, swaying the tight curtains and the pale yellow tassels of the bookmarks on the bookshelf. Augustus's grey hair on his forehead swayed gently, and the report paper on the mahogany desk rustled. His coat and hat were hung on a branch-shaped hanger next to him. The old record player that Renault and Hannick bought from the new Apolloan Community Market last week was still working hard. The melodious and relaxing Tarsinus minor tunes were always stuck, but Augustus knew that it was a miracle that this old antique that may have existed in the early colonial era could still sound today. Maybe this record player is not as old as the locals said. After all, Renault bought it for only the price of scrap metal. Now that I think about it, even though there were 2 arc tanks and a platoon of resocialized soldiers standing at the entrance of the community with guns and live ammunition, it was a miracle that Renault and Hannick could walk out of the angry Kel-morian community residence intact. In the supervisor's office, Lisa, wearing a medical sergeant's uniform, was cleaning up some collections left by the former Kel-morian mining supervisor, including some ores that radiated colorful light, but had unknown uses, portraits of beautiful women that met the aesthetics of the Kel-morian people, and gilded pickaxes. After cleaning up, Lisa turned to hang up the oil painting of Augustus' mother and several caged handguards that Augustus used to practice swordsmanship. Augustus was practicing swordsmanship and other ancient fighting techniques to improve his unsightly close combat ability, but the only thing he had done well so far was the salted fish thrust. What is this? Lisa took out a plain safe from a box. It's swine from Taping Island, Tarsinus. If I remember correctly, it should be 14 years old. Handle it with care. Augustus looked up. Do you need to put it in a safe? It's just a bottle of wine. Lisa put it down gently. You don't understand the Mengsk family's love for fine wine, just like the Kel-morians are keen on finding beautiful stones in the mud. As for the safe, it's the tradition. Augustus said, it's the same as you like beautiful skirts. In this world, there are other things besides crabs that can make people feel happy. For example, happiness, satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment. Well, you are always right. Lisa shook her head. I haven't touched them for almost 2 months, and I don't think about that thing all day long. I'm trying to make something else become everything in my life. I'm so happy for you. Augustus put down the pen in his hand again, with a smile on his face. It seems that drug rehabilitation has been successful so far. I believe that sooner or later you will no longer need my supervision. In this way, you will no longer be restricted by those hallucinogenic drugs and sink into despair all day long. Lisa, I think your life should belong to you. It's impossible for me to be unable to control myself or my life. Just like the doctor said, I'm weak-willed and hopeless. Where Augustus couldn't see, Lisa's lipstick-coated pink lips shrank. Augustus looked at Lisa, waiting for her to continue. You still need supervision. Lisa whispered. You have too little confidence in yourself. Augustus was stunned for a moment, thinking what should I say. If all else fails, after leaving the army, I can hire a few maids to look after you. Something is wrong. Why does this sound like keeping a mistress? Of course, I have other ways. Augustus changed his words and said, after retiring, what are your plans? In the future, I don't have any plans in the future. Lisa took out a framed photo from Augustus' box. It was a little girl with a silver ponytail, about 10 years old, and looked very tall. Is that your sister? She asked. It looks like she is. Augustus said uncertainly. Okay, give it to me. Then pour me a cup of coffee, okay? Augustus still has a lot of work to do, calculating the income of the mine, calculating the cost of workers and transportation costs. After the ceasefire agreement came into effect, all offensive plans of the Terran Federation Army have been terminated, and most of the landing troops have returned to the warships that are stationed in synchronous orbit. However, Augustus took the initiative to apply to stay in New Apolloin, and promised to resume production in the local factory in the shortest possible time and transport enough Adene crystals to Minhoff's passport. No one would have paid attention to the opinion of a small lieutenant, even though Augustus was already quite famous, both in the small circle of officers of the 33rd Ground Assault Division, and in the larger civilian class. Augustus' old boss, Lieutenant Colonel Warfield, would not help him in applying to manage the New Apolloin factory, because Warfield always insisted on fairness and justice. He could tolerate some minor problems, but he was always ruthless on major issues. In the end, it was his brother Arcturus's old subordinate named Chuck who remained in the army temporarily who took over the matter. Today is the first day that the document was issued, and Augustus got his wish and became the manager of a large mine earlier than his brother. If nothing unexpected happens, Arcturus, who had just left the army, is driving a space engineering vehicle on a desolate planet in the fringe star zone to mine and analyze all samples. In addition to the Heavenly Demon platoon, Augustus also commanded a resocialization company, and the 4 arc-light tanks left on the ground were also under his command. These troops were more than enough to maintain public order, and the main force of the Kel-morian did not dare to risk unilaterally tearing up the ceasefire agreement to attack an ordinary mining area. The war has been going on for too long, and both sides need time to repair. As for whether to continue fighting or conclude a peace treaty after this, it is up to the governments of both sides to decide. Although the ceasefire has been reached, there are still minor frictions in various parts of Minhoff. Some officers do not want to die on a planet full of stones and Kel-morians on the eve of the end of the war, which is also the main reason why Augustus was able to get this appointment. The problem brought about by the high proportion of resocialized soldiers has also begun to emerge. That is, there are fewer and fewer soldiers who can handle management affairs flexibly. At this time, some noisy sound suddenly came from outside the window. Augustus smiled, and he knew that the Kel-morian miners he hired had arrived. There are many ways to become wealthy in the Kaprulu sector, but owning a mine of rare crystals is a surefire way to enter the upper class, whether you sell the title or hire someone to mine it. Chapter 83, Small Loot. Now, Augustus owns a mine of Ardeen crystal. The new Apolloan mine is a relatively low-level mine in the Kel-morian Federation, which is classified by mineral richness. It is worth mining, but the reserves are not high. If the mining cost is too high, the Kel-morian Mining Company will immediately abandon it. The higher purity of the crystal and the newly discovered rare metal ores made the mining plan pass, and a small community called New Apolloan appeared near the mine. Today, with the influx of colonists, gold diggers and miners, the population of this community has reached nearly 20,000. Even so, the crystal ore and other rare crystal ores produced by the New Apolloan mine every 24 hours far exceed the standard medium-sized mines held by the Terran Federation. The Kel-morians estimate the value of high-purity Ardeen crystals per cubic meter, rather than per gram as the Federation does, and their persistence in finding crystal veins is closer to obsession. In the past few decades, there was an incident where the wealthy legal person of the Kel-morian Mining Company came forward to buy the mineral mining rights of an entire planet of the Terran Federation. At that time, even the most powerful and formidable founding family of the Federation, the Tagore family, was amazed at the wealth of the Moria Mining Company, and no longer considered the Moria people to be country bumpkins and uncivilized savages who had never seen the world. The nobles dancing in the ornately decorated ballroom immediately raised the status of the Moria people, upstarts who lacked education and did not know etiquette. However, this was also the fuse of the Kalian War. The greedy Terrans did not have the Kel-morians' intuition and perseverance in searching for mineral veins, but they just had to make sure that they had more and better guns in their hands than the Kel-morian. The Kel-morian took dozens or even hundreds of years to build their mining empire, while the Terran Federation only needed a war of less than 4 years to collapse it and take all the wealth for themselves. However, Augustus knew that this war only made a small number of people in the Federation richer, while most civilians became poorer than before. For the independence of Korhal IV and the revolutionary cause of his father Angus, it also showed that the revolution of the Ka people was tenable. When the masses found that they could not support themselves and their families, no matter how hard they worked, the fire of the uprising would sweep the world, and more people would support Ka. At this time, the door of the supervisor's office suddenly opened, and Titus Findley, who was wearing a loose uniform, walked in with a stack of documents in his hand. This is a list of the new batch of miners who applied to work underground. Tell me what medicine you gave those Kel-morians? Titus brought the document to Augustus' desk and said, "Tell me how you dealt with them. Less working hours, more bread." Augustus threw the pen in his hand on the table, put his elbow on the table, and clasped his fingers against his chin. "I have investigated. The lives of miners in the Kel-morian Union and workers in other industries are not as good as the Union government advertises. Many people actually don't have enough to eat. This world is not much better than the Terran Federation. Exploitation and oppression still exist. What the workers' right to a reasonable wage should not be violated. Workers should enjoy basic social welfare and have the right to freely elect a government are actually propaganda on paper." The owners of the mining guild and union representatives also said that the Kel-morian Union is a union of workers and the working class should dominate the world. He said, of course, their workers are indeed in a better situation than the Terrans. Before the war broke out, the wages of workers in the Union were generally 2 to 3 times higher than those in the Federation. I think this idea is very good, but the government of the Federation only says one thing and does another. You can understand it by looking at who founded the Kel-morian Federation. The Federation was established by the Mining Guild of Moria and the Transport Guild of Kelonus, and the real power is in the hands of the legal representatives elected by them. The union was not established by workers, but by entrepreneurs. Do you know what this means? You know I don't have time to pay attention to current political affairs, worry about national affairs, and worry about whether the system is reasonable or not. Titus frowned. Why do you study these things? Don't tell me you want to rebel against the nobles. And I remember that your family is a great noble of Korhal IV. What's the difference between this and you wanting to lift up your skirt? You ask it. Augustus looked at Titus. Okay, what does that mean? My great politician. Titus said in a muffled voice. That means the union is just a means for the real rich people in Kel-morian to control the workers. When the contradictions between the working class and the upper class cannot be reconciled, the union representatives will stand up to speak for the workers and fight for their interests. And after the representatives' arguments, the company's president will always agree reluctantly. But in fact, the terms of compromise have already been negotiated in secret. Augustus said, the union has no power to influence the decision making of an independent government. They have the right to propose bills, but that's all. But what does this have to do with us? No, with my desire to live a romantic life after making a fortune. Titus pulled a chair from the side and sat down, buried his butt in the soft cushion, and hummed comfortably. It matters a lot. Augustus took Lisa's coffee. The latter's gracefully twisting waist made Titus sigh at Augustus. Good luck. The Kel-morian government is actually not very popular, so as long as we treat them better, at least let them have 3 meals a day, have extra money to save, and still have hope in life, then they will be willing to work for me. Besides, in order to prevent the Kel-morian Federation from continuing to transport personnel and weapons to Meinhof, the interstellar route for imported goods has been cut off by our fleet, and the problem of long-term lack of self-sufficiency in food has been greatly magnified. Jim went to the local market and saw that the price of food had doubled and hunger had spread. He said, if the residents of New Apolloan can't find work, their families will starve to death. Mengsk, I never thought you were not a capitalist. Titus showed a cunning smile. The blood of vampire flows in your body. But if you ask me, you are not a real capitalist. We will stay here for at most a month. Why do you care whether they live or die? The Kel-morians are our enemies. If you ask me, just let them live, just like their union government did to them before. In this way, we can wrestle much more crystal ore than we do now. Anyway, the people of New Apolloan have to work for us if they don't want to starve to death. We don't need to do much better than their original government, and we don't owe the Kel-morians anything. This shitty stone planet is unlucky enough, but also lucky enough, because the war stopped at the moment it was about to affect here. The Kel-morians are also people. We are still enemies now, but maybe we will become friends in the future. Augustus shook his head, and I don't want to see anyone starve to death in front of me. You're a good man, Mengsk. Titus gave Augustus a good man card. By the way, there's one more thing I almost forgot. Didn't you say you wanted to modify that transport plane? The person you want is here. Luaksu, Jasmine, Donald John, Lazy Reader, Supervisor number 12, Eden class world ship, Liu Feng Buking, Xi Jinping, and Aisha Marude whose monthly tickets. Thanks to Donald John, Liu Feng Buking, Agent Rangrong, and Commander Ilsh for their awards. Thanks to everyone for their recommendations and investment. Hurry up and cooperate. Chapter 84 Recruiting Swan. When Augustus saw Ori Swan and his cousins, Titus had just walked out of the door, and 2 resocialized soldiers in power armor were conducting routine body searches. The noise outside the window became even louder, and the sound of machines began to rumble. Augustus adjusted his collar, adjusted his facial expression, put his hands on the table, and sat up straight. However, before Augustus could say please come in, 4 impatient Meinhof women rushed in. These people were generally shorter than the Terrans of the same age, about 5.5 to 6 feet tall, but each of them had a stronger and broader bone structure than the Terrans, and the exposed thick arms were full of tangled muscles. The Meinhof miner in the lead had a cracked upper lip that trembled when he spoke, and a thick black mustache under his big nose. His skin was a little too pale, but his face was full of traces of weathering, and the scars and burns from the scratches of sharp objects were clearly visible. The miner had a loud voice, and when he shouted, it was as if a steam train passed through this office. The Kel-morians of Meinhof did not have much deep-rooted hatred for the Terrans. They just vaguely felt that the inflation and internal economic collapse caused by the war should be blamed on the Terran Federation, but in fact they had never seen many Terrans. What else can we do? We need to eat. Are you Foreman Augustus Mengsk? Sorry, I may have a local accent. The miner said, I'm Rory Swan. You can call me Rory or Swan, but there are 2,000 swans in New Aberrowan. My cousin heard that you are recruiting here, and the salary is not bad. Rory Swan. Augustus whispered the name again. I remember you. Swan, I picked you out of more than 400 applications and asked someone to tell you that you can bring some helpers. Augustus was very familiar with this name. Rory Swan was a genius engineer affiliated with the Raynor Rangers in StarCraft. As long as there was a design drawing, it seemed that there was nothing he couldn't make. You have a first level mechanics license, and you once converted the assault armored vehicle of Calanus into a tank, and it still uses a fossil fuel engine. In addition, you have upgraded the built-in battery of the automatic mining drone of New Aberoan, which increased its endurance by 3 to 5 days. Augustus looked at Swan. This undoubtedly proves your talent in this area. But I'm also confused. Just with the patent fees, you and your people should not go hungry. You don't understand the situation, Chief. It feels strange. I'd better call you Foreman. Swan shook his head. The Swan family is a big family. We have many brothers and sisters. For a large family that makes a living in the mine, the more people who can work in the mine, the better. You have 3 children in the family, and he has 5. Slowly, there are too many children. Now is the most difficult time for the family. I must share the difficulties with my relatives. As long as I have the strength to spare, I will help others. Swan said, unity is the key to the survival of the Swan family. You Terrans may not understand, but when I need help, they will definitely support me with all their efforts. The Kel-morian family is much larger than ours, and the ties between them are quite strong. They always like to be lively. Augustus chuckled and said, I like children too. Well, alas, it's great that you think so now. Swan sighed. He was also wondering why the Tyranid officer not only didn't talk about work, but also talked so much with him, but he didn't dislike this neatly dressed, grey-haired young man. After all, he was not the stereotypical Tyranid soldier, the bald Tyranid with scars all over his face, and muscles all over his body. It's not easy for the Swan family to raise so many children. How about it? Have you considered changing to a job with higher salary and better working environment? Augustus asked Lisa next to him to move a few chairs for them, motioning them to sit down, as if he wanted to have a good talk. This made Swan and his brothers even more confused. You are not even 30 years old this year, but your achievements are far more amazing than what I just said. Swan, your talent in technology and mechanics is actually much higher than you think. As long as you hand in your resume, any top technology or engineering company will extend an olive branch to you. The young Swan was not good at hiding his joy and immediately realized that he was a little flattered. He soon understood that Augustus wanted to recruit him. I will not work for the Terran Federation army. Many of my relatives and friends died at the hands of the Terrans. I think I made it very clear. Not the army, but work for me. Augustus seemed to have been prepared. He pushed an already opened personal terminal in front of Swan and others. On it was a brief introduction of the Mengsk family and the valuation of its family business by industry insiders. We are in need of talents like you. As for the salary, I guarantee you will be satisfied. Swan and his brothers took the personal terminal and looked at it, and they all doubted its authenticity. After all, they had never seen so much money in their lives. My relatives and friends have also advised me to find a decent and high-paying job instead of staying in the mines. Swan thought for a moment and said, but I insist on staying in the family. Most high-tech companies are in Moria, which is too far from Minhof. I don't want to leave my family. Is that so? Augustus nodded and stopped talking. Swan thought Augustus had given up. After all, he might have just said it casually, just a polite remark. Isn't that the case with the Terrans? They are obsessed with cumbersome and useless etiquette, appearing to be elegant and gentlemanly, but in fact they are alienated and indifferent, and not many of their words are sincere. But Swan was then shocked by what Augustus said. I just want to hire a mining family to work for my mining company. Augustus said, I can hire all of you. The Swan family is a long-standing family of Kel-morian technology miners, and it is worth Augustus spending a lot of money to win them over. My hometown, Korhal IV, is the most prosperous and most advanced planet among the 13 main star worlds of the Terran Federation. It has a complete and sound social welfare system. Each of you will be able to receive a full pension after retirement. Augustus seemed to have completely forgotten the purpose of his visit to them. Of course, words alone are not enough to convince people. You can first settle down in Korhal for a while, work for my family's technology companies and industrial enterprises for a while, and then bring your families over. If the Swan family moves to Kara, I can arrange jobs for every adult, and I will cover all the expenses for the move. I will even buy a piece of land as your new family territory. Chapter 85. You're flattering me. But we are Kel-morians, said a member of the Swan family. It doesn't make any difference to me. Augustus spread his hands. Swan looked at several of his clansmen, and one of them who looked like Swan's brother said, we were born and raised here, and we never thought of leaving Meinhof. Even if you can really do it, the elders in the family will not agree. Kel-morians, the only things we cannot abandon are our homeland and traditions. Only in the most desperate circumstances will we choose to leave our homeland. Swan also felt very strange. This Terran officer, whom he had never met, thought too highly of himself. Suddenly, he had an illusion that he was really very powerful. But was the other party really playing a trick on him? Just based on a resume that could not be proven to be true or false, he was determined to be worth recruiting at all costs. Even if everything on it was true, Swan's achievements were not outstanding. He believed that there must be many people in the Terran Federation who were much better than a miner who had never received higher education. This was too strange. Maybe this officer is really a noble son of the Mengsk family, but such people often overestimate their abilities before they have been beaten and do things that are earth-shattering but cannot stand up to scrutiny. The Swan family has nearly 2,000 people. Even if they can't survive, they will not pin their fate on a young man without a beard. Of course, these are just some of my personal ideas, and they are not mature enough. But my family does lack talents like you, whether in mining or military technology. Augustus did not expect Swan to agree immediately, nor did he expect him to follow him now. I hope you can consider this invitation carefully. No matter when, the Mengsk family will keep a place for you. The reason why I did this is not a sudden impulse, but I have thought about it for a long time. Mr. Swan, staying in this Meinhof mine will only bury your talents, and the eagle of Caprulu should spread its wings and fly high. Augustus thought about this problem, that is, if Korhal IV wants to revolt, it must develop the military industry. In this regard, Korhal's foundation is much weaker than that of Tarsinus. Not just Swan, he needs talents from all walks of life, the more the better. Regardless of origin, regardless of price. Your talent is far beyond your imagination. Mr. Swan, your future is in the sea of stars, in the Milky Way, not between rocks and wastelands. Augustus finally said, when the human race was still in its infancy, when the first primitive man with imagination sat by the campfire and looked up at the stars, the human conquest of the universe had already begun. Swan realized that Augustus was serious and was not wasting time joking with him, but it was hard for Swan and his brothers not to attribute this to a young man's overly imaginative mind and his wild imagination. Maybe Augustus compared himself to Alexander and Caesar, wanting to be a conqueror king who conquered the universe, but maybe he was really capable of great things? I don't know how I can help you. Swan was somewhat tempted, but he still doubted his ability when it comes to repairing machines, mending some scrap copper and iron, or adding wheels to robots. I'm good at this. To be honest, what else can you expect a miner to do? Many things, such as new power armor, new tanks, new giant walking armor, and new battle cruisers, and you are the founder of these great inventions. Augustus stared at Swan with his cold grey eyes without blinking, and began to paint a pie in the sky. A huge technology group called Swan Engineering will be born in your hands. I have never thought about this. Swan widened his eyes. Go on. Imagine that the leaps and bounds of science and technology will eventually be used to improve people's livelihood, and you will be a great man who benefits mankind. Augustus continued to paint a pie. Many years later, children will carve stone statues for you and erect monuments. I like this. Swan stroked his dark beard. But I have to think about it carefully. There are too many things to worry about when going on a long journey. I haven't even heard of Korhal, let alone the Mengsk family of Korhal. In fact, as long as Swan wanted, he could immediately leave Meinhof and seek a good job on the core planet of Kel-morian. But he stayed on this desolate planet until 2,500 years ago. It was not until he could no longer bear the exploitation of Kel-morian bureaucrats and rebelled angrily that Swan joined the Raynor Rangers. But before that, there was no wealthy son of a noble who suddenly came to say that, even if it was not for money, you must realize your ideals and ambitions. Of course. It doesn't matter if you don't make a decision now. We can sign the contract in a year. Augustus smiled brightly. What? Before Swan spoke, his cousins could talk in a low voice. They thought they were talking in a low voice. Selling indentures? We don't want to be slaves of Terran entrepreneurs. This is protected by law. Augustus said. No problem. I haven't agreed yet. Swan thought for a moment and said, after talking for so long, I almost forgot what I came here for. Aren't you going to hire me to modify your spaceship? Yes, I'll take you to see her. Augustus stood up and took his coat from the hanger next to him. Lisa, you can take a break. Augustus led Swan and others out of the supervisor's office, walked down the stone stairs step by step, and walked into the open industrial park through a gate, guarded by the heavenly demon guards. About a squad of resocialized soldiers were running past Augustus, stopping in unison to salute him, and their discipline amazed the Kel-morians. On the way Augustus walked to the temporary hangar. All the factory workshops had already started work, and the workers were busy, and they looked very motivated. After Augustus's troops left, they might have to go back to the time when they didn't have enough food. The temporary hangar was converted from a raw material warehouse, and the walls were painted black and grey. The two warehouses next to the hangar were filled with boxes of cut and weighed Adian crystals, about 4/5 of which had to be handed over, and the rest were put into Augustus' pocket. After the air valve of the hangar was opened, Swan finally saw the black and grey painted Little Devil transport ship. The new upgrade plan. Adding a new invisible force field transmitter is not cheap. I always speak directly. Swan looked at Augustus and said, Boss Mengsk, do you have enough money? Thanks to Os, Yalxin Wuan, LLT, I always likes Loke. Book friend 2020050922212845. Northern Warwolf, Strazero, Variety Booking, Luaksu, and Jasmine for their monthly tickets. Thanks to book friend 150,802,110,823,515 and Agent Rangran for their awards. And thank you for your recommendation tickets and investment. Chapter 86 Indefinite Ceasefire and Christmas Holiday. As the 12th month of 2488 was approaching, the situation on Minhof became tense again. Both the Terran Federation army and the secretly armed Kel-morians were ready to go to war again. This dark blue planet, which was not beautiful and charming in the universe, was filled with a depressing atmosphere of a war. Officers like Augustus who were appointed to take over the surface factories had already received advance notices from the Marine Corps Supreme Command to all levels of frontline combat troops. The war was over and would not continue. When the deadline for the first ceasefire agreement arrived, more Kel-morian factories, mines and even interstellar ports on Minhof were taken over by the Terran Federation army. About less than 8% of the light industry was not controlled by the occupying forces. The Federal Marine Corps Supreme Command set up the command center in the largest city in Minhof. Everyone knew that the Kel-morian Federation had been defeated, but they had not surrendered. Some planets in the Federation with strong martial virtues refused to carry out Moria's order for an indefinite ceasefire, so local wars continued. Augustus knew that the war would eventually drag into 2489, or even drag on for a few more months. The governments of the Kel-morian Federation and the Terran Federation would spend a long time negotiating the final peace agreement, arguing over even the slightest interests at the negotiating table. At the negotiating table, the status of both parties was not equal. There is no doubt that this peace agreement would be an extremely harsh and unequal treaty for the defeated Kel-morian Federation, an insult from the arrogant Terran Federation. The Federation might have to cede most of the mining guilds and even colonies in the Kaprulu sector to avoid being annexed. However, for Augustus and his heavenly demons, this was indeed good news. Once the war was over, it would be a good choice to stay in the army or retire and go home according to the normal process. So, on a sunny day like December 20th, Augustus and his men gathered in the workers' canteen of the new Apollo mining factory for a meal. This was the best place they could find for a meal. The local catering industry was not well developed, and mid to high-end restaurants could only be found in the city. The table made up of 5 long alloy tables was filled with not so rich food. More than 40 soldiers in brown uniforms feasted on the food while talking about their visions for the future. Although Meinhof was a world with very scarce supplies, Augustus still spent a lot of money to buy some good ingredients and asked the chefs in the factory to make some food that was more palatable than the individual rations and steamed potatoes with stew. After more than a month, the heavenly devils once again ate cheeseburgers, grilled sausages, grilled steaks, and creamy bacon pasta, and tasted the expensive masala black tea. To be honest, this vacation means nothing to me. Hanek said as he stuffed food into his mouth. Shiloh is too boring. I joined the army just to seek excitement. Alas, although it is a bit sad to say, my relatives in the town probably think I'm dead. Then why did you apply for it? Renault was angry because he could not go home to reunite with his family before Christmas. In a few days, the first batch of soldiers who were rotated out can go home for Christmas. More resocialized soldiers will replace them, and the other unlucky ones will still have to stay in their posts. Renault is one of them. About 1/3 of the heavenly devils got a week-long vacation, while the others will have to wait until after Christmas. Augustus' application was approved, and he will return to Korhal IV by spacecraft at the interstellar launch port of Meinhof the day after tomorrow. In this dinner for the heavenly devils, their power armor technician Feig was also invited. Although this short technician did not have a tattoo of a hooded skull, he was undoubtedly recognized by other heavenly devils. There is no harm in applying. You don't have to go out for training. Isn't it good to stay in the barracks and sleep well? Hanek said. Speaking of which, I have lived alone since I was a child. Christmas is just a place where I can pick up some fun little things. Santa Claus has never visited my worn out socks. For this reason, I even built a chimney without a stove at home. That's because your socks are too smelly. Amy Brandon interrupted. Then, Hank, come back to Korhal with me. Augustus said after swallowing the food in his mouth. I'll show you what a real big city is like. Okay. Hanek nodded. Titus, where are you going on vacation? Then, Augustus asked Titus across from him. Me. I will never leave these sparkling little crystals of Meinhof, not even for a minute or a second. Titus said, even on vacation, I will not leave my post. I love the Marine Corps. Jim, after I leave, remember to ask Yalovsky to take people to guard the gate and electrify the walls. Augustus snorted, don't let Titus bring women in. This is a military camp. Also, you have to make arrangements for our newly recruited workers. The Kel-morian named Rory Swan is now an external engineer of the Heavenly Devil. Give him the best treatment. No problem. Renault said gloatingly, I can guarantee that not even a fly can fly in. How do you know? That boy Jim won't go along with me. This child is at the age where he is full of longing for women. Titus raised his eyebrows. You never let Jim have fun with us. This is not right. Even the strictest parents should know the principle of relaxation and tension. I didn't say he couldn't have fun. Augustus shook his head. I just told you not to lead him astray. Kid didn't say a single swear word when he came here, but now he talks about shit and fart all the time. After getting to know you in the strip club, you and Josephine had more fun than each other. Jim is still so young. I don't want to see him indulge in indulgence and pleasure. When Armo died, he was already overly dependent on alcohol. Augustus looked at Reno, whose face was flushed. I believe in Jim because he never lets me down. Well, I'll go out and have fun. Titus gave up and began to imagine the beautiful body of a woman. I wonder what a Kel-morian girl tastes like. When the short, sturdy, bearded Kel-morian miner appeared in his mind, Titus snorted in disgust, as if he had eaten a dead fly. Augustus talked with the others for a while. In addition to those who were still staying in Meinhof and preparing to go home, Ward and Zinder were also going to go back with him. The former didn't want to go back to the sad place of the past, while the latter was born in the slums and was also homeless. As for Lundstein, although he would also return to Korhal to reunite with his family during the holidays, his departure time was one day later than Augustus. Josephine didn't say a word about going home, as if there would be a gang waiting to hang him up as soon as he returned to Korhal. After talking for a long time, Lisa, who seemed to be forgotten by Augustus, finally spoke. Augustus, don't you want to ask how my vacation is arranged? I remember your family is from Tarsus. Don't you want to go back to see your father? Augustus looked at Lisa sitting next to him. Lisa has now gotten rid of her dependence on drugs. Her long hair, which used to be a little dull, now exudes a bright ginger luster and bursts of fragrance. What's so good about him, an old man? Lisa folded her hands in front of her chest. I just plan to travel to Korhal. Just want to visit your mother on the way. Okay then. Augustus spread his hands. I feel so bad for poor old Anthony Cassidy. Chapter 87 Korhal IV, Stilling Skyport, Christmas Eve. After 3 days of super time and space travel, the galaxy hopper that Augustus, Lisa and others were riding on landed at a starship skyport outside the capital city of Korhal IV, Stilling City. Without exception, everyone who had never been to Korhal was stunned when they stepped down the gangway of the galaxy hopper. The magnificent terminal building of Stilling Skyport is a building with a white steel frame and large glass cubes that can change color. The interior is decorated with black aluminum alloy guardrails and travertine marble. When passengers step into it, they can see the gentle sun of Korhal IV and the lush vegetation planted between the staircases through the curtain wall glass windows. Suspended intelligent robots and turbine drones are constantly cleaning the mirror-like floors and glass windows. Every Korhal person is well dressed and elegantly spoken. To avoid attracting attention, Augustus was only wearing a dark brown square-necked long-sleeved jacket and straight trousers, and a pair of blue and black striped sneakers, looking like a young student. Lisa was wearing a knee-length light yellow pleated skirt, a black cotton short-sleeved t-shirt, and a leather bag on her waist that was actually a medical bag. The tall, dark-skinned Connor Ward was wearing a black short-sleeved leather vest and ragged jeans. His nose, which was a little crooked because it was broken in the battle, was a pair of half-open light blue eyes. His eyes always gave people a fierce feeling, and there was a skull tattoo of the Devil of Heaven on his exposed arm. If Ward looked like a burly and fierce bodyguard when standing next to Augustus, then Hanukkah and Zinder, who were only wearing leather jackets and casual loose trousers, were two groundhogs that had just crawled out of the cave, exclaiming "ah" from time to time. Augustus did not wait too long in the terminal. Soon, a group of men in security uniforms and butler uniforms surrounded a burly man and found them. The front of all the coats was embroidered with a golden wolf head in gold thread. It was the emblem of the Mengsk family. The leader was Acton Field, the security captain of the Mengsk family, and one of Angus's most trusted people. He had been in the Mengsk family for many years and almost watched Augustus and his sister grow up. "You kid, none of the Mengsk children are ordinary people." Acton and Augustus hugged each other and patted each other's shoulders. "Where are Mom and Dorothy?" Augustus smiled and asked. "They are still in the white stone castle in the mountains north of Stilling. Remember? That's where your grandfather died." Acton said. "I still remember him." A vague image appeared in Augustus' mind. The grandfather in his memory was very tall, but his voice and smile were very distant. The Mengsk family still continues the tradition of the royal family of the Earth era. Angus named his youngest son Augustus in memory of his father. Angus used a whole security force and 3 Type 58 Land Cougar armored vehicles and 12 vultures to escort his son. The vultures were guarding the 3 armored vehicles in a triangular formation. One of the armored vehicles carried Augustus and others, while the other 2 were fully loaded with soldiers with live ammunition. This is not a pathological overprotection. Although the power of the Mengsk family in Korhal is deeply rooted, like a towering tree rooted in Korhal, some potential business rivals and Angus's political enemies often hire assassins to assassinate the few family members of this family. Considering the amazing power and assets of the Mengsk family, such guards are indispensable even to deal with kidnapping and harassment. Augustus was sitting in the backseat of one of the Jaguar armored vehicles. He was sitting by the window, and he turned his head to stare at the scenery outside the window through the bulletproof glass a few feet behind him. Acton, who looked serious, and Lisa, who was a little uneasy, were sitting next to Augustus. "I heard from your mother that you are ready to retire," Acton said. "Yes, and I don't plan to delay until next year. The war is over. I submitted my retirement documents last weekend, but it has not been approved yet." Augustus said, "If everything goes well, I can retire next month." Just like his brother Arcturus, Augustus has no attachment to the army. Augustus is now a second lieutenant. Even if he will probably become a colonel after the war is completely declared over next year, he doesn't want to stay. His father is going to rebel, and the whole planet is going to revolt. If he doesn't run away quickly, will he stay in the army and wait for death? The only thing Augustus is thinking about now is his heavenly devil. Otherwise he would not have planned to return to Meinhof after Christmas. Okay, your father needs a helper. Acton nodded. He is still very young, but his hair is almost white. Well, Field, where are we going? Stilling City or White Castle? Augustus asked. To your mother. She misses you very much. Acton, due to the local government environmental protection policy, Stilling Skyport is actually far outside the city circle. After leaving Skyport, the Mengsk family's convoy has to drive a distance to reach a more remote destination. The escorted convoy sped along the traffic artery outside the Stilling city circle, passing through the rural fields between the Silver Grey Complex Industrial Park and the city circle. It was autumn at this time, and the green plants on both sides of the main road were still lush and green, and the vast wheat fields in the distance were still rendered luxuriously golden by the strong autumn atmosphere. The sky was clear and the flowing clouds seemed to be a group of Pegasus passing by, just like the freehand world depicted in pastoral oil paintings. Unlike other main planets of the Terran Federation that focus on economic development and ignore environmental pollution, Korhal IV has revised the latest air purification regulations and introduced a large number of renewable resources with foresight. Therefore, Kar is still a beautiful world full of greenery while maintaining highly developed technology and industry. Augustus continued to look at the scenery outside the window. At this time, the pastoral and dense forests were far away, and the hills in the south of Stilling City gradually enlarged in his eyes. Many dense silver spots can be seen in the gaps between the hills, which are the reflections of metal and glass. Augustus seemed to be able to see the gorgeous neon lights and huge holographic screens and billboards of Stilling, and hear the vibrant hustle and bustle. The convoy drove onto a silver grey alloy bridge built on the hills. As the slope continued to rise, the full view of Stilling City could be seen at this time. Stilling seemed like a city made of mercury, with shining metal and glass reflecting dazzling silver light in the sun, and a network of bridges and traffic arteries running through the city seemed like dense and clear black lines in the mercury world. In the center of the city, towering sky buildings stood among the silver grey buildings. These majestic buildings had clear-cut polyhedron shapes and other geometric structures beyond the limits of human imagination, carrying the dream of technology and the beauty of the future world. In Augustus' memory, Stilling at night was as brilliant as summer fireworks, with a sea of neon lights and countless IAA projection screens converging into a sea of light, extending to the mountains in the south of the city and the coast in the north. The brilliant lights reached all the way to the sky, zigzagging and reflecting between the clouds, like clouds. The lights of Kar were colorful and magnificent. Thanks to King Dikyangai Junjian, Book Friend 202001181347006663, coughing to death. Glory to the eldest son, Alvin's Knight, the distant shogun, Shenzixi, a dream of 1,000 years, and floating water boat for their monthly tickets. Chapter 88 Family. The magnificent and vast castle complex of the Mengsk family is located on a steep cliff by the sea, with deep blue waves hitting the golden sand and reefs below the cliff. The scenery here is beautiful and the climate is pleasant, as if you are on the mythical Nordic coast. This building, as old as the colony, has always been the summer vacation place for the leaders of the Mengsk family. It is 4 miles away from the nearest city to the north, the capital of Korhal, Stilling, far away from the power center of the arrogant and extravagant new nobility and corrupt government. The White Castle stands on the top of the cliff. It is a medieval castle-style building surrounded by high white walls. All the high walls and pointed three-dimensional towers are made of pure white marble ashlar masonry, and the tall pointed towers stand among the lingering mist. This magnificent pure white fortress stood between the clouds and winds as early as the era of colonial pioneers. At that time, the brave and fearless Tarsinus colonists came to the distant Korhal system on the second-generation warp spacecraft and eventually chose to build a new home on the fourth planet in this system with a pleasant climate. The Mengsk family was the original leader of this group of colonists. Only a mountain road between dense forests can lead directly to the Mengsk family castle, and the masters and their servants there often travel in small private airships. The security here is even more stringent than the Mengsk family sky tower in Stilling. Only the most reliable servants will be sent here, swearing to guard the mistress of the Mengsk family and her descendants with their lives. The convoy escorting Augustus did not change to an aircraft, but drove along the mountain road with many checkpoints. Augustus recorded every checkpoint he encountered, and found that the security personnel in black uniforms here each held an electromagnetic rifle, wore a simple combat uniform with power armor plates, and wore infrared goggles. However, he did not think that these people could stop the 3 ghost agents, and the other party would definitely designate an infiltration plan based on the intelligence, or even blend in with the security personnel. Field. How many security forces are there here? Augustus frowned as the convoy drove on the winding mountain road, which foreshadowed his inner worries. Including those inside the White Castle, there are about 200 people. Acton said, 1/3 of these people are retired soldiers from the Korhal Civil Defense Force and the Planetary Defense Force, and the rest are carefully selected Korhal warriors. It's hard to say, people's thoughts are hard to guess. I still prefer to hire the Umoyan people. Umoyan is a world that is rarely infiltrated by federal agents. Augustus said, the Umoyan people are proficient in using their advanced scientific and technological means to complete infiltration and counter-infiltration work. Most importantly, the Umoyan people have always supported your father's career behind the scenes. It's rare to hear the word father from your mouth. Angus actually sometimes reflects on whether there is something wrong with the way he educates his children, but Dorothy is always sensible and well behaved. Acton teased a few words and said, your father thought seriously about your suggestions, and felt that those were all doable. We are now recruiting people in Umoyan. The young people there have a very enthusiastic response to this. Due to media publicity, there are many Kel-morian sympathizers in Umoyan, who are full of passion, but have nowhere to vent. How many? Augustus asked. Enough to form a non-governmental Umojan volunteer army. A smile appeared on Acton's serious face. They are willing to fight for Korhal's independence from the control of the Terran Federation. This is the best news I have heard in these days besides the victory of the war. Augustus nodded. It would be great if we can drag Umojan into the War of Independence. Yes, Korhal and the Federation will inevitably have a war, but it is almost impossible for Umojan to intervene in the war except for providing volunteers and military supplies. Acton said, if they were willing to do that, Kel-morian would not have lost so badly. That's because the Federation has not pushed them to the point of no return, and Umojan's desire for expansion is not as strong as that of the Terran Federation, and there are not many conflicts with the Terran Federation. Augustus' cold grey eyes stared calmly at the shade of trees beside the mountain road. But as long as the Terran Federation is sure that they have eliminated all threats except Umojan, the war that the Umojans have tried their best to avoid will come soon. Unfortunately, the next target of the federal government is Korhal. Acton cast an ambiguous look at Augustus. This is unlike you. Augustus, you like war and hate politics. In the past, you were always indifferent to what your father did. When you are used to death and blood, and young lives like flowers pass away before your eyes, you can no longer agree with my original view of war. War is not beautiful, and the epics of the galactic heroes are nothing more than children's plays compared to it. Augustus said, you have grown up a lot. At this time, the convoy had already resisted the summer manor outside Mengsk Castle. The security captain Acton Field, who was responsible for the security of the Mengsk family members and all factories and industries, said when the armored vehicle gradually stopped in the courtyard inside the castle, I don't know whether this is good or bad for you. Augustus did not answer Acton, because a silver-haired girl in a white dress was running towards the armored car where Augustus was, holding up her skirt like a jumping bird. Mrs. Mengsk, wearing an elegant cornflower dress, was standing at the Roman column-style door of the castle and looking at him. Augustus. His sister Dorothy threw herself into Augustus' arms, pushing Augustus, who was about to get off the car, back into his seat. You're back. Holding Dorothy in his arms, Augustus realized that she was the motivation for him to continue fighting. Augustus wanted to pick up Dorothy, like he did when he was a child, but failed. You've gained weight again. What? You've gained weight. Dorothy angrily arched in Augustus' arms. Augustus almost dragged Dorothy, who was clinging to him, to his mother. The beautiful woman who always treated people elegantly burst into tears when she saw her little son and hugged her son tightly. We all missed you, Augustus, for more than half a year. You are now a strong young man, and you are more mature than before. Catherine said, Mom is so happy for you. Looking at his mother's tearful face, Augustus felt a sharp pain in his heart. He suddenly thought of a terrible scene. His father Angus's head was chopped off. His mother and sister fell in a pool of blood, with hideous wounds on their chests and temples. No, this must not happen. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Ambassador Kel-morian. From the outside, the magnificent building of the Mengsk family looks like a Danish castle in the Middle Ages. The interior of the retro-designed castle is a different scene. The low-key and solemn corridors are connected by spiral staircases, leading to spacious halls with glass domes. The chandeliers under the domes emit a gilded light. After Augustus hugged his mother's old housekeeper, and the cold weapon master specially hired by the Mengsk family to teach their children swordsmanship, Augustus was very happy that his swordsmanship instructor did not check whether he had fallen behind in his daily swordsmanship practice at this time. In fact, maybe even her sister could easily defeat him in the martial arts studio now. After that, Augustus introduced several of his subordinates to his mother. These heavenly demons who have no family and are like duckweed and have nowhere to rely on will be Augustus's right-hand men in the future. Lisa Cassidy must have secretly made up for the etiquette of Tarsinus nobles. She behaved appropriately and naturally, like a noble lady, elegant and reserved, with the bright eyes of a girl, not a butcher's child. Ward was calm and composed, only bending his straight back when facing Augustus' mother. Harnack acted like a monkey trying hard to restrain himself from talking nonsense, while Zinda was completely stunned by the gorgeous decoration. Catherine sincerely thanked Lisa and others, and prayed for the Holy Spirit to be with them according to tradition. And Dorothy always held Augustus's hand, just as she was when she was a child. Augustus led his stunned subordinates through the red-carpeted corridor into the banquet hall for guests. The corridor was decorated with statues of Korhal wolves and gold-framed paintings telling the great deeds of the original pioneers of Korhal, which have now become legends that have accompanied generations of Korhal people growing up. There was a huge painting on the blue cloud patterned marble wall of the banquet hall decorated with silver leaves and silver-plated vines. It was a middle-aged man with grey hair, wearing a colonial-era red-hooded hunting robe, with a long-handled hunting rifle on his back, a spotted greyhound born and raised in Korhal at his feet, and a golden eagle standing on the thick pad on his shoulder. It was a portrait left by the first generation of Mengsk, when the colonists still used old-fashioned weapons to fight against Korhal's wolves and other fierce beasts. Whether in conquering nature or building their homes, the Mengsk family has always been the leader of Korhal's colonists. The two walls of the banquet hall facing the ocean and the mountains are full of glass windows. Through the windows, the high cliffs overlook a dark ocean. The sea surface under the sun is like flowing gold, and the undulating waves are rolling white waves. To the north are rolling mountains. It is autumn at this latitude, and the pseudo-maple trees in Sterling are as red as flames. Whenever Augustus sees such a charming scene, he always thinks of Korhal in the StarCraft Second Era. Unlike the dark green planet today, Korhal, which had been baptized by 1,000 apocalyptic nuclear bombs from the Terran Federation, was already a world composed of radioactive wasteland and radioactive wasteland. The cruelest and most direct punishment. When Augustus, Lisa and others sat down on the silver-plated chairs, a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes walked into the banquet hall. On the chest of his uniform was a blue and white pattern with two triangles and circles superimposed. The man had a gentle appearance and a clean-shaven beard. At first glance, he was the kind of person who paid great attention to his appearance on weekdays. His face looked very young, but his hair was almost grey like an old man. Elin Pasteur, Imogen's diplomatic ambassador to Korhal IV, one of the elected parliament members. In recent years, Elin has been frequently traveling between Imogen and Korhal, bringing a steady stream of assistance to the Mengsk family and other support from the Imogen elected parliament. Augustus's first impression of this man was when he was only 8 years old, and his memory at that time was already very vague. However, Augustus remembered his daughter more clearly. She was a beautiful girl of the same age as his brother Arcturus. She was very beautiful, with bright eyes and long golden hair that made people feel very impressed. Of course, the reason why Augustus was so impressed was not because he had any longing for this girl who was much older than him at that time, but because of a more shameful memory. Arin's only daughter, the young, beautiful, and gentle Juliana Pasteur, always thought that Arcturus had two sisters. It's nice to meet you, young Augustus Mengsk. You are becoming as reliable as your father. Arin walked straight to Augustus, shook hands with him and hugged him. Sooner or later, you will inherit your father's career, the glory of the Mengsk family and the great achievements that have been passed down from generation to generation, he said with praise. To catch up with my father, I still need a lot of time to experience. Augustus smiled. As he expected, after saying this, a relieved smile immediately appeared on his mother's face. Do you really think so? Aelin was even happier than Augustus' mother. The Umoyan Council is always worried about Angus's physical condition. If he collapses, we really don't know who will replace him. He whispered to Augustus. It seems that the war has changed you. The war is over, and with it, my ambitions and aspirations are over. Augustus said, I will never be a general in my life, but maybe I still have a chance to wear ribbons and medals for generals. Sit down, Uncle Aelin. Augustus sat down with Aelin and talked about some issues about Umoyan military assistance. The cunning Aelin always emphasized Umoyan's declining economy, but never mentioned the straight-line increase in foreign trade during the Kalian War. I want to know how Umoyan's research on CMC power armor is going, and whether it is possible to mass-produce Umoyan power armor. Augustus asked Aelin. We have made some progress. Aelin said vaguely, I can assure you that there will be no shortage of weapons and ammunition, tanks, and airships, medical equipment, and even personnel support. I hope so. Augustus smiled. I hope the friendship between Korhal and Imogen will last forever. Augustus was not in a hurry to get more information or more assistance from Imogen, so he turned to talk to Aelin about some things that did not seem to be full of gunpowder. I still remember Juliana. I remember she told me that she would become a lawyer in the future. Augustus smiled and said, is she okay now? But, very good. Unexpectedly, Aelin Pasteur's face changed immediately, and his face was livid. Juliana failed to become a lawyer. She gave up the career she had worked hard for half her life. Augustus realized that Aelin's attitude had changed 180 degrees, but he couldn't figure out the reason. Speaking of this, your brother Arcturus Mengsk. Aelin almost spit out every word with gritted teeth, as if he was chewing a bone. Is he still alive? Actus is still alive. He was already a colonel when he retired, and now he is exploring the galaxy. Augustus chose his words carefully, trying to avoid further angering Arin Baston. Really? Arin sighed with a complicated expression. That's great. Augustus thought hard for a long time, trying to find the reason for Arin's change of attitude. Suddenly, a young man with golden hair popped up in his mind, the heir of the Terran Empire in the game, Valerian Mengsk, the child of Arcturus Mengsk and a Umoyan woman. He almost forgot this message. Valerian, the son of Arcturus and Juliana. But the key to the problem is that the Mengsk family, from Angus and Catherine to Augustus and Dorothy, has never heard of this matter, and even Arcturus himself has never mentioned it. What's going on? Could it be that his brother is still a scumbag? He ran away after getting Juliana pregnant, or did he not take contraceptive measures when he went to bed with a girl and forgot about it when he returned to the army? If you count carefully, Valerian, who was 20 years old after the Battle of the Brood, should have been born now, but the Mengsk family is completely unaware of it. If he hadn't met Arin, Augustus would not have remembered this at all. Augustus decided to ask for clarification. Poor little Wah, uncle kisses me. This is the little skirt. Thanks to kissing she, still me. Book friend 201905261244357769. Agent Rangrong. Book friend 2017041712574690. Book friend 201901272230499005 for their monthly tickets, and thanks to Agent Rangrong and Kekia for their awards. Chapter 19 Fu Valerian, Actors and Juliana, what happened between them? While Augustus was speaking, the servants of the Mengsk family began to place the silverware and knives and forks filled with food on the dining table. Lisa was constantly emphasizing to Hanak and Zinder that they should pay attention to table manners and not embarrass the lieutenant. Erin Pastor was an experienced politician who was gentle and patient regardless of his mood, but now he was unable to control his temper. "No, I swore to protect this secret." "Secret?" Augustus stared at Erin's melancholy blue eyes. "What kind of secret can make you so angry and hostile to Arcturus?" "I don't like to question other people's secrets, but this concerns my brother. I can guess something." Erin looked at Augustus in confusion, but didn't believe he could guess anything. 10 years ago or even longer, Juliana visited Ka once. At that time, he came with you to visit. Augustus showed a look of reminiscence. "Since then, I remember that Arcturus always received letters from Juliana from Kel-morian, and he would write a reply every once in a while. My parents didn't know about this. Dorothy was still a little girl at that time, and was still very ignorant, but I still remember some of it. Because Arcturus had no defense against me at all. This pen-pal relationship lasted until Arcturus joined the army. I believe that even in the barracks, they would not break off this contact. Yes, Juliana has been writing letters to a man I don't know since she returned to Kel-morian after that visit. Until 3 years later, Juliana was still writing letters, even though the other party had ignored her." Ilan took a deep breath. He had a lot of things to do at that time, and when he noticed that Juliana had fallen, it was too late. There were no sweet words, no greasy love words, and the content of the letters was very normal. At first, Juliana only wrote to ask about Arcturus's recent situation, but the clever latter immediately realized that the girl was interested in him, so he began to write back. In the letter, Arcturus portrayed himself as a man with great ambitions and a brave and fearless hero. Between his philosophical and poetic words, his clear analysis and profound insights into the world created the image of a perfect man in Juliana's letter. Of course, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that Augustus Mengsk is strong and handsome. He is very charming, and this charm is absolutely fatal to a young girl like Juliana who is not well versed in the world. Juliana is beautiful. She almost meets the best fantasy of a Terran about a Yumajan woman. I know that Arcturus really likes Juliana, but I don't know if he is ready to devote himself to a love affair. Augustus began to expose his brother's bottom line. In my impression, Arcturus never expected to start his own family. Arcturus longed for the warmth of women, but perhaps like many things he had done in his life, he would always try many things he had never done before to prove that he could do everything well. But soon, when he succeeded without any obstacles, the initial enthusiasm would quickly disappear. Augustus noticed that Erin's face was gradually distorted. Before Juliana, Arcturus had never tried a real love. This damn beast, Augustus Mengsk. Erin wanted to continue to curse, but thinking of his lovely grandson, he still held back. So, he just regarded this as a boring game to prove his masculinity? Or did he just want to sleep with beautiful unmarried girls? Augustus could probably understand this feeling. If his precious only daughter inexplicably got pregnant before marriage, and the father of the child disappeared for 7 or 8 years. Thinking of this, he began to get angry. My stupid brother, don't blame me. You should tell me what happened. Augustus knocked on the table. Secret. If Juliana was actually deceived, then there is no need for you to hide anything for her. Otherwise, the longer the time goes, the more harm she will suffer. Aelin was anxious and angry. If Arcturus was standing in front of him now, he would definitely break the other's neck. Forget it. Forget it. I was planning to tell Arcturus in a few months. No matter how much Juliana begged, I didn't want to delay it any longer. Aelin was still sighing, but he showed a relieved expression. Your brother didn't tell you that he now has a 7-year-old son because he knows nothing about it. This. Augustus was shocked. How could this happen? I found out about all this when Juliana's belly got bigger and bigger. The wrinkles on Aelin's face seemed to increase at this moment. How could this happen? I'm asking her too. Around the end of 2480, Juliana went to Telada 9th, a new tourist planet. Damn, I thought she was just going to relax, but later the bodyguard told me that Juliana was going to see Arcturus. Aelin said. They happened to encounter a federal rebel attack on the federal marines on vacation, and Arcturus successfully saved the beauty. Damn good luck. It's all my fault. I'm a failed father. So, then, some things fell into place. Augustus took a glass of fine wine from a maid wearing a white dust cap, and took a few sips. What's the name of the child? Valerian. It means brave. Aelin gradually calmed down. Augustus could see that he liked the child very much. It sounds like the name of an ancient Roman emperor. Augustus held the wine glass in his hand and gently shook the wine inside. So, Juliana gave birth to the child and raised him, but concealed this from his biological father. What on earth was this woman thinking? He showed a little anger. I can already imagine how Arcturus would react when he heard about this. He missed the years when his son was born and grew up, and when the little guy had already established a preliminary worldview. Arcturus was not ready to be a father and take on this responsibility. Juliana believed in Arcturus's bragging. She thought that the other party was engaged in a great cause and could not be distracted. She was also worried that Arcturus might die of distraction when he heard about this on the battlefield. Aelin smiled self-deprecatingly. She is still a little girl after all, naive and full of fantasy. Just like her mother who left me long ago, Juliana is willful and stubborn, and her thoughts are as unpredictable as a cloud that is close yet distant. But now that the Kalian War is over, I don't think I have to keep this secret anymore. At this time, Augustus quickly drank the glass of wine, as if he had made up his mind. My mother will be very happy that she suddenly has a little grandson. Augustus said. She will definitely go to Imogen to see Valerian. Angus is at a time when he needs his family the most, and Catherine is leaving at this time. Erin frowned. No, she must go to Imogen. Augustus looked at Erin, and his tone was like he was giving orders in the army, leaving no room for doubt. Dorothy must go too. It's enough for my father to have me by his side. I hope you can arrange it yourself. The spaceship and the personnel, all of which must be the most trustworthy. From boarding to key after landing in Imogen, everything must be kept secret, he said. The Mengsk family will claim to the outside world that they went to Telada 9th. Of course, there will really be two people who have undergone plastic surgery and whose faces and figures are exactly the same as this. They will take the spaceship to the Telada system, and we will buy the unheadline column of the day. Chapter 91 Pneumoian Shadow Guard. When Augustus' mother, Catherine Mengsk, heard the news, she was about to announce the start of the banquet, and announce to everyone that her youngest son had returned safely. Catherine was really shocked. It was the first time that Augustus saw so many expressions on his mother's face, including dullness, shock, anger, and joy. You mean, Arcturus has a son? When did it happen? Why didn't he tell me? What's the girl's name? Where are they? How old is the child? Show me the photo. Catherine slumped in the chair. After the initial shock, she suddenly threw a series of questions to Augustus. I have a little nephew. Dorothy was sitting next to her mother. She was no longer an ignorant little girl. Although she was not tall, her soft chest had begun to take shape. Brother, will he like the little skirt you wore? Augustus, who was opening his personal terminal, seemed to be pierced through the chest by a sharp arrow. He wanted to remind his sister that he had not worn a skirt for many years, but it didn't seem right to say it. So Augustus pretended not to hear anything, and showed his mother the photo of Valerian sent by Erin on his personal terminal. Remember Juliana, the daughter of the Pasteur family? This is Arcturus and her child, Valerian. That's a good name, Valerian. He really looks like me. Catherine was no longer angry, but looked at the photo of Valerian happily. Let me see. Dorothy squeezed in from behind her brother. It was a little blond boy wearing black overalls and a small shirt, playing in the small river in the Pasteur manner. Valerian had milky and tender white skin. Like Augustus, he also had high cheekbones, a hawk-shaped nose and the cold grey eyes that were the hallmark of the Mengsk family. His soft shoulder-length golden hair was tied into a cute ponytail. Augustus noticed that, although Valerian was still just a child, his body was thinner than his peers, his arms were too thin, and there was almost no flesh. He was weak and gentle, and not as strong and active as Arcturus was when he was a child. Why did he look a bit like a little girl? He also looks like Angus. When Valerian frowns, he looks exactly like his grandfather. Catherine flipped through the photos for a while, and her joy gradually faded. When the guests began to eat, her expression became very serious, and she sat upright, revealing the majesty of the hostess of a large family. Tell me what happened, Augustus. Tell me what Pastor told you, and don't make excuses for your brother. Shaking his head, Augustus told his mother everything, and persuaded her to forgive his brother. Humph. Catherine was still angry, but she knew that it was not all Arcturus' fault. Because he himself did not know, and he never thought, that Juliana would get pregnant after just one night of pleasure in Terran Empire. Is Arcturus still unaware? I can't contact him. Augustus wanted to say something good for his brother, but after a moment he decided not to care about his life or death. Actor's current expedition team is likely thousands of light years away from us. Their communication equipment is also decades old and seriously aged. It may take 1 to 2 months to receive information. He shouldn't do that. Catherine sighed and said nothing more, just stroking Valerian's photo. Over the years, Elon Pastor has always stood with the Mengsk family. They are both friends and comrades in arms. Catherine feels that they owe the Pastor family a lot. This poor child has never seen his father since he was born. He is the heir of the Mengsk family, and we have the responsibility to raise and educate him. She said, he has never seen his grandmother and grandfather. I really want to meet this child. But Kar is in great danger now. Valerian is in Imogen now, in the Pastor family's manor far away from the city. Arlen can arrange a sufficiently secret interstellar voyage for you and Dorothy, and ensure that you are sent to Imogen without anyone knowing. Augustus said immediately. In response to the threat of the Terran Federation, the Imogen National Defense Army has been established. They are building an orbital platform in the synchronous orbit of their home planet to deal with the Federation's fleet. All trade is conducted in the low-gravity ports on its satellites, and any Federation spacecraft that enters the atmosphere without permission will be shot down by anti-aircraft guns. At the same time, I will arrange for your substitutes to divert the Federation's attention. It's safe enough there. You're too impatient. I know you want to send us to a safer place. I really want to see little Valerian, but over the years, I have learned to be patient and wait. Catherine looked into her son's cold grey eyes. Kar is indeed in chaos now, with staunch supporters of the federal government, Kel-morian sympathizers, Kar separatists, revolutionaries, federal secret police and agents. Yes, the most direct and effective way is to stay away from the center of the revolution. She said, we should send Dorothy to the Pastor family. But your father still needs me, and I must be with him. Angus is already alone, and the senators of the Kar Senate and the nobles of Stilling want to bring him down all the time. In Korhal, only the people support him, but the people are too far away from him. Before Dorothy could speak, Augustus spoke again. Things are far more serious than you can imagine. I have received reliable intelligence that the Terran Federation is training a group of agents with powerful psychic powers who can complete assassinations silently. They are the most ruthless and efficient killers among humans. Assassination is a common method of the federal government, and my father deserves their most powerful assassins. Even if we use 100 or 1,000 defense measures, it is difficult to be foolproof. Please believe this, Mother. Only when we are sure that you will never make any mistakes, my father and I can devote ourselves to the cause of revolution. Training psychics into super soldiers. They actually did that. Catherine knew some inside information, so she was even more shocked when she knew about this. At least more than 10 years ago, or even earlier, the Federation has been doing this. Augustus looked at his mother with a firm gaze. Do you understand the seriousness of the matter? Seekers have supernatural powers. We don't know whether they are still considered human beings or new humans who have evolved to another level. God knows what they are. It is not surprising that Seekers have the ability to pass through walls like spirits. But what about you and your father? Catherine was persuaded by Augustus. She realized that she and her daughter would only be a burden. We will be fine. I'm trying to get the corresponding support from Imogen, better anti-stealth equipment and more elite Umo National Defense soldiers. Augustus breathed a sigh of relief. I believe that Imogen is also training psychic agents, but this must be top secret. If Arlen did not deceive me, then even he, an elected member of the parliament, did not know about it. However, Arlen promised that I would discuss with the parliament and send Imogen Seekers to Korhal. With their protection, our safety is truly guaranteed. Augustus remembered that Imogen also had ghost agents called Shadow Guards. Perhaps they would not be the opponent of Serac Kerrigan, the most powerful ghost agent in history, but it would be better than having a group of ordinary people to resist Seekers. Okay. Dorothy and I will leave Korhal. Catherine agreed. Augustus, after the dinner, go to your father. Angus is in Mengsk Sky Tower installing, and he needs to know about this. Thank you Corporal Carey for the 10,000 point reward for going out on patrol. Thank you Command Lsh, Book Friend 2021040522224034004, and Agent Gran for the reward. Thanks to Corporal Carey for going out on patrol. Pigsy loves to sleep. Book Friend 150,614,145,545,728. Shan Jan Yang, Tu Gaoshi, Agent Rong, gradually can no longer be seen. Ling Zhao Yun Kiro, SimDD 41, coughing to death, and Strazaro for the reward. Chapter 92, Explosion of Soldiers. The city of Stilling is like flowing mercury, with thousands of glass panels glittering in the sun. The silver and black Mengsk Sky Tower stands in the center of the city, and the skyscrapers surrounding it are like stalagmites made of steel and glass. Looking down from the Mengsk family's private luxury airship, the streets are dotted with lush green, the traffic is like black lines, and commercial spacecrafts are dragging bright trails between buildings and clouds. Augustus sat in his exclusive seat, looking down at the streets of Stilling, and the tall buildings that still look majestic from the sky through a round window. Even though the government of the Terran Federation is still trying every means to exploit the people here and plunder the wealth of this beautiful planet, Korhal IV is still so prosperous and has never diminished its luster because of the Kalian War. This is why Korhal IV is known as a pearl of the Terran Federation. But the red and blue flag of the Federation still flying in Steel's spirit in the Federation military camp close to the mountains at the north end of the city made Augustus clearly realize that the real controller of this planet is still the federal government. The senators standing at the top of power and fame of Korhal IV and the financial group behind them all have the same master, that is, the federal parliament and the powerful creation family that dominate the entire world in the distant Tarsinus. When the airship passed through the hemispherical energy shield that descended like a curtain from the top of Mengsk Sky Tower and landed on the runway with green plants on the edge, more than a dozen security personnel in black uniforms, flat caps of the same color and goggles immediately ran towards the airship. Except for Augustus and Security Captain Acton, all accompanying personnel must undergo the most stringent inspection. This energy shield is a latest addition. Acton pointed to the light blue energy shield that looked like a veil from the tarmac and said, the new technology of Last Technology Company can resist most energy weapons and ballistic weapons, shield detectors and satellite cameras, and at the same time, it can block the strong winds at an altitude of 3,000 feet. Very good design. I need its detailed information, including its defense level, endurance limit and other upgrade options. Augustus nodded to the security guard who bowed to him and walked into the elevator on the tarmac. If it doesn't meet my requirements, I think we should change suppliers. Are you still not satisfied? This energy shield cost us a lot of money. Acton followed Augustus. He was older than Angus, but his body was still as strong as a bull. Deerfield, if the Terran Federation fleet holds a giant sword and we can only use eggshells to resist it, soon no one will pay you. Augustus said half jokingly. We'll talk about this later. I just came back from Meinhof and will be returning to the army in 2 days. Tell me, what earth-shaking changes have taken place in Korka in the 6 months I was away? A lot. As the elevator began to slowly descend, Acton said to Augustus, your father gave 46 speeches on the Korka independence movement in various parts of Korka in 6 months, and 33 of those speeches had an audience of more than 50,000 people. In October, workers in the Confederate city of Balak responded to Angus' call and took to the streets to march, demanding that the federal government explain the ever longer working hours and corruption. The local government dispatched all police officers and used tear gas and batons to disperse the crowd, he said. As a result, this caused a disaster. When someone ordered the shooting, the laxly trained police officers had not even had time to empty their magazines before tens of thousands of angry people overwhelmed them. The demonstrators occupied the police station, the municipal building, and the studio building, tore down the federal flag, and replaced it with the blue 3-star flag of Korhal. In the riot that was out of control, thousands of demonstrators and police were injured, and hundreds died from trampling and shooting. So, someone is going to be in trouble. Augustus guessed the federal government's reaction. He had seen a report about this incident in the unevening news, but there were only a few words from beginning to end. It was obvious that the federal government tried hard to downplay the impact of this incident. The new Korhal governor dismissed several people who had little to do with this incident, and then announced that it was all due to the instigation of Augustus Mengsk. As Acton was talking, the elevator stopped on an upper floor. He's not wrong. Augustus shrugged noncommittally and walked through the open elevator door into the corridor with security guards standing on both sides. Last month, an outpost in the north of Stilling was attacked by terrorists, and more than 100 federal soldiers were killed in the attack. Acton said as he walked. I know who did it without thinking. Augustus looked at the smooth walls on both sides of the corridor and the cameras at the corners, but he didn't feel much safe. I guess you did a great job and didn't leave any handles behind. The federal officials are in a mess because all the evidence points to an accident, an explosion caused by a leak in a high-energy gas pipeline. Acton said. But this is not very clever. Augustus walked to the door of a room guarded by 2 armed security guards and stopped. After the detector scanned his retina, a spacious office appeared in front of him. A man with grey hair, but still in upright posture, was facing Augustus with his back to a huge glass wall. Augustus Mengsk was wearing a black square-collared coat and loose trousers, staring at the building opposite the Mengsk Sky Tower. This scene made Augustus feel like deja vu. Augustus Mengsk, while being a highly prestigious and influential senator of the Korhal Parliament, always does things that go against his class, making speeches and parade speeches criticizing the corruption of the federal government and leading the independence movement in Korhal. In other words, Angus is a staunch revolutionary and an instigator in the news who threatens the people to confront the federal government. In the federal unholographic news program, which has been corrupted and controlled by money and power, the host will call his many public speeches against the federal government on Korhal as inflammatory false remarks. In some more radical columns, the contributors openly criticize Angus as a traitor and rioter. To Augustus's surprise, Augustus saw many photos of his family in the office, including a propaganda poster of him in military uniform. According to him, it was the cover of a certain issue of the Universe fashion magazine. As one of the war heroes promoted by the Tarsinus federal government, the military, and the Universe News Network, Augustus was chosen for his aristocratic education, his exemplary status as a founding family, and his handsome appearance. Among them, editor-in-chief Handy Anderson's unremitting flattery always embarrassed Augustus because most of the war records were fabricated and could not stand up to scrutiny. However, the founding families behind the board of directors and the federal parliament were the driving forces behind the scenes. They packaged some war heroes as invincible military gods to increase people's confidence in the war, so that they can spend their money peacefully, stimulate the increasingly sluggish economy and the nearly collapsed stock market. Augustus had never been here before, and he didn't expect that his father, who seemed to always be against him on weekdays, was actually paying attention to him. This suddenly reminded him of what his sister Dorothy often mentioned in her letters. Brother, we watch the news every day, looking for your name on it, but we are worried that it is on the list of victims. They say you killed many Kel-morians, down to every number in every battle. Brother, we are not excited by your military exploits. We are only worried that you will die in the next battle. Those letters are the bond that conveys family affection and strength. You are back, Augustus. My son. Angus did not turn around to hug Augustus. The gap between father and son still existed. Yes, I'm back, father. Augustus was not afraid of his father. In the past, they often quarreled, only because of their completely different ideas. Catherine just told me. When Angus turned around, Augustus was surprised to find that his father was much older than before. but his eyes, which were so similar to his own, were bright and energetic. I support your idea of sending them to Imogen. The minions of the Federation are watching us in the dark, and they will not give up any opportunity to threaten me. For now, Imogen is indeed the safest place. Augustus nodded. The ghost agents of the Terran Federation will arrive at any time, and the security measures here must be raised to another level. Do you think this is not enough? Angus frowned and said, at the beginning, I didn't want to turn our family's residence into a heavily guarded fortress, or hire 10 times more people than before to maintain it. Because this is extremely unfavorable to me in public opinion. People generally believe that only big capitalists will spend a lot of money to purchase weapons to protect their property. And I should be a fighter for freedom, a leader who guides the people to the light, not Cromwell surrounded by troops. In this way, the news media controlled by the Federation will describe me as a usurper and a tyrant. No matter how they smear, I think Ka must have an army that can compete with the Federation. Augustus said to his father, I don't care about reputation, but they'd better call me the Washington of Korhal, the Napoleon of the Terran Empire. You and I have never thought the same, kid. Angus was not angry at Augustus' words. He showed great joy. I'm glad that you finally stood on my side. I never told others that I was exhausted. I was surrounded by enemies and onlookers, and the allies of the Mengsk family were swaying like weeds in the wind. Augustus, I'm glad that you can come back to me. Is this a dream? Augustus, since you grew up, you no longer call me father. Angus, it is more real than any wall or city you have ever seen. Augustus said, oh, come on, sit down and have a drink. Let's talk. Angus smiled and took out a bottle of red wine worth thousands of dollars from the wine cabinet in the office. Angus had not had a good talk with Augustus since his coming of age ceremony. In this way, his last conversation with his eldest son Arcturus eventually turned into an unpleasant quarrel. Arcturus never agreed with his father's revolution, which was the biggest regret of Angus' life. Angus originally thought that his second son would follow the same path as his brother and stay away from this arbitrary and tyrannical father, but Augustus not only returned to his side, but also agreed with Korhal's revolutionary cause, which made the aging old Mengsk overjoyed. Angus is a typical patriarch of an authoritarian family. He believes that his decades of experience can help his son avoid some detours and prevent them from being hurt or regretting one day in the future. In the future route planned by Angus for his son, Arcturus will definitely inherit his position as a senator, while Augustus will manage the family's huge industry. But Augustus doesn't want to. He is tired of, and even hates, that his life is controlled by others, even if that person is his father. How do you think we should achieve the final victory of this revolution? Angus, Augustus and Acton filled their glasses at a set of rattan tables and chairs in the office. Only war. Augustus replied, Angus, I believe you have already prepared for a total war. In the history of the earth, peace gained by shouting slogans, begging, and kneeling is not long lasting. We need an army, a fleet, and a commander who can win. Of course, we have a revolutionary army. At this time, Acton said, we have recruited 120,000 people and sent some of them to the military academy in Imogen. They will graduate next year, and then we will have a group of reliable officers and generals. Not enough. Far from enough. Augustus looked at Acton with his cold grey eyes without blinking. We need at least 1 million people to capture this planet, and several times or even more people to defend it. Explosion of troops. This is what we want to do, but 120,000 people is already the limit. These people are all volunteers to fight for the revolutionary cause. They usually contact each other through underground organizations and receive secret training. Acton said. Then abolish the government and the Senate, form a new parliament, implement new laws, and change the recruitment system. Once we control Stirling, we will recruit soldiers from this city. Once we control the industrial cities in the south, we will make all the young people of the right age there wear helmets and hold long guns. Augustus said loudly. I have served in the Federal Marines and killed many Kel-morians in a brutal war. I know better than you how terrible the Federal Army is. When the riots and terrorist attacks on Korhal intensify, the Federal Marines will definitely intervene. Therefore, we urgently need a strong revolutionary army. Politically, we should win the support of other planets and even some of the Tarsinus creation families to obtain more assistance and distract the attention of the federal government. I don't know whether you don't understand or are unwilling to admit that in the war launched by the nobles and those in power, this generation must be tied to the rumbling wheels of war until they die. A long silence. If we have to fight a war, then Korhal will win, Angus said, but in the end, I still hope that this will be a peaceful evolution, a handover ceremony that returns power from the centralized authorities to the people. I know what you want to say. It is of course a daydream to expect the dragon to willingly hand over its treasures and gold. Augustus was not surprised to hear such words from Angus. Angus was more like a pure evolutionary leader, rather than an ambitious person who took power through revolution. He wanted to establish a clean new government and rebuild Korhal IV into a free and peaceful world. Just like in the past, Angus was a great and selfless revolutionary. He was even willing to use his death to warn all the Terrans. We all know that war is inevitable. Acton also spoke at this time. I have talked with your father many times, and we no longer have any hope for peaceful evolution. Where there is an uprising, suppression will follow. In the coming war, countless people will die. Even so, we must fight to the end. Angus said firmly, in the past, I always had some illusions about the federal government, but now I understand that it is hopeless. The giant Terran Federation is covered with ugly pustules. It must be cut with a sharp sword before the wound can heal again. Compared to Kel-morian and Kel-morian, the Terran Federation has too many territories and planets. Their bloated and corrupt government can only use force to oppress the people in the colonies, and all the oppressed have long been dissatisfied with them, he said. Now, as long as the first planet that blows the horn of uprising appears, those onlookers will rise up. Kara will not be the only planet to resist the rule of the Federation, and it will definitely not be the last. Father, how many years do you think we will fight this war? Augustus asked in a low voice. 10 years or more. Angus said, when I'm gone, you will inherit my career, as well as your son and Valerian. Augustus, although I'm reluctant to admit it, most of the Korhal Revolutionary Army are young people who have not received military training. Qualified officers can only be recruited from retired federal veterans, but I cannot guarantee their loyalty. We also lack generals, because the Korhal people are not always good at fighting. This revolutionary army has rationality and ambition, but in essence it is just a group of farmers, workers, and company employees who are hastily assembled. They are willing to die for the independence of Korhal, but they have not yet become disciplined and obedient soldiers. Augustus, you are a hero, and you are the person I trust most. You will be the leader of the Korhal Revolutionary Army, because you are the most suitable candidate I can think of. Maybe it will be you who will lead this mob. Thanks to Agent Rangrong, Ilida, Long Yiling, Jiliuxiang Disu, Command Aish, Archbishop Artenis of the Star Spirits, Book Friend 202010160000225300, and Tegudeo013 for their monthly tickets. Thanks to Command Aish, Tegudeo013, Lion Zhengdan Long, Agent Rangrong, and Book Friend 20192221617416 for their awards. Chapter 93, The Ka Revolutionary Army. On Christmas Eve, Augustus did not stay with his family, but hurriedly summoned the cadres and members of the Revolutionary Army. Each Confederation city, Free Trade City, Industrial City and Starporting City sent 2 to 3 representatives. The location was in the warehouse of an IAA holographic projection screen factory under the Mengsk Group. Although this huge organization has more than 100,000 people and is scattered in cities all over Korhal IV, in order to avoid being hunted down by the police and agents, they still use the secret methods of underground organizations to communicate. Rather than an army, it is better to say that it is an underground party connected by enthusiasm, faith and the desire for freedom. The Korhal Revolutionary Army is a relatively loose revolutionary organization. The members of the Revolutionary Army in each city are organized and managed by a revolutionary committee. Each committee member is responsible for several urban communities or factories and villages. The supreme leader of the Revolutionary Army is called Supreme Marshal, First Leader and Pioneer, but no one knows his real name, because it is just a vague symbol. Augustus Mengsk was the founder of this revolutionary army, but he was not the marshal. This position was supposed to belong to his eldest son Augustus Mengsk, but the latter was busy mining. On the afternoon of December 23rd, Augustus met nearly 130 members of the Revolutionary Army in the factory warehouse, where the doors and windows were painted black with a special black coating. Some of them were the organizers of the stilling demonstration, while others were responsible for propaganda and recruiting new members, and the rest were the initiators of the terrorist attack. The funds for their activities were mainly provided by the Mengsk family. In the warehouse, illuminated by blue lights, Augustus stood in front of the participants wearing a black square-collared long-sleeved coat. The members of the Revolutionary Army, wearing work clothes, suits, casual clothes, high school student uniforms and even bar waiter uniforms, whispered about Augustus' identity. Augustus' code name was Second Lieutenant, which didn't sound very impressive, but in the Revolutionary Army, the military rank was not a position, but an exclusive title for an important person. Many people speculated that he was the first leader or marshal, because only he had the power to summon the top leaders of the Revolutionary Army here. Some people recognized Augustus as the second son of Augustus Mengsk, the leader of the Korhal independence movement, and were very surprised that he could appear here. Before Augustus joined the army, few people in the outside world could get their photos, because the descendants of the Mengsk family had always been very low-key. But after Augustus became a war hero, and became known as the commander of the Heavenly Devils, his fame in Korhal IV naturally rose. This was completely contrary to the expectations of the federal government and the UN, who originally thought that this would more or less weaken Angus's prestige. Most Korhal people despise the war heroes nominated by the Terran federal government, but Augustus Mengsk was an exception. Simply because of his last name and his iconic cold grey eyes and hair. Bronze statues of the first generation of Mengsk were erected in many places in Korhal IV, and flowers would be offered on his birthday. People regard Steel Wolf as a kind of spiritual symbol of the tenacity and fearlessness of the Korhal people. They believe that the Mengsk family has inherited the characteristics and qualities of wolves, and each generation of Mengsk is a natural leader of wolves. I'm Augustus Mengsk, the supreme leader of the Korhal Revolutionary Army. I called you together, just to understand some of the situation. Augustus looked at many pairs of eyes watching him. Before that, I have something to announce. Although this was only their first meeting with Augustus, at this moment, everyone stopped talking, infected by Augustus's serious face and sonorous voice. They stared at Augustus' young but majestic face, looking forward to every sentence and every word he was about to say. Those impassioned speeches, the cry for evolution and freedom, the pursuit of freedom and independence. My father Augustus Mengsk has said enough, and I have only one thing to say, he said. The war has begun. In the past, you had many identities, sons, fathers, husbands. But now, I want to call you fighters of the revolution, my soldiers. Fight for Ka. Almost at the same time, all the revolutionaries saluted Augustus with the fist-raise salute. For the new order, Augustus clenched his right fist and raised it high. Ka is above everything. The response was uniform and deafening. Ka is above everything. The revolutionaries who came to this meeting knew that this would be a general mobilization for war, which meant that the Ka Revolutionary Army was about to become a real army. This not-so-wide hardware distribution warehouse was full of high-spirited and passionate young people, ranging in age from 16 to 40, from all walks of life. There were losers and winners, from sewer cleaners to factory managers. From failed art students to suspected mental patients, they were the all-encompassing and diverse reflections of this society. Augustus asked everyone to be quiet, and then began to ask them some questions. Corporal Newsom, how many people can be mobilized in the Confederate city of Notland? Augustus asked. 2,000. If I give you 3 months, can you increase this number to 20,000? I will mobilize all the people with lofty ideals that I can mobilize. If I can't do it, then let my blood be shed on the land of Ka. Augustus asked each representative about the number of local revolutionary troops and the revolutionary will of the masses, and then he said, time is running out, fellow countrymen, soldiers. We must gather like-minded people in the shortest possible time to establish a standing army. This standing army must have at least 10 reorganized army divisions and 2 army groups formed by them. Remember, this will be a professional army, not a hastily assembled peasant uprising army. The army will be commanded by the Revolutionary Army headquarters and obey orders. The Ka Revolutionary Army needs to be restrained by strict discipline, maintained by sergeants and officers to execute orders issued by the Supreme Command. We need conscription departments, logistics departments, human resources management, hospital departments, and supervision departments. We also need to build Korhal's own fleet from scratch and train qualified fleet soldiers. Without battleships and battle cruisers, we can convert merchant ships into assault ships, cargo ships into gunboats, and giant class transport ships into frigates. The new government will allocate funds to build a synchronous orbit platform and transform 2 satellites into fortresses. So we also need a rapid reaction force capable of fighting in space. Chapter 94 Preparations before the uprising. December 24th. Just one day away from Christmas, Augustus was still working at the Korhal Revolutionary Army headquarters he had temporarily set up on the 62nd floor of Mengsk's Sky Tower. A loose revolutionary organization was becoming a real army under the documents issued by Augustus. The Revolutionary Army would set up various departments, establish a soldier database, integrate the source of soldiers, and form platoons, companies, battalions, brigades, and divisions according to the soldiers' birthplaces. Augustus was writing a document asking his father to pay for the establishment of the Mengsk Military Academy. This was what he had been doing for the past few days, asking for people, money, and everything. Augustus now had great power, and he was actually forming a new Korhal Revolutionary Army, and the financial resources of the Mengsk family were also leaning towards the Revolutionary Army. Angus still understood the principle of having a strong army in his hands, but he really lacked talent in this area and action-oriented people who could put it into practice. After all, Angus was just a politician, and he always hoped to use political means to fight for the rights of the people, but he was not ruthless or resolute enough. Augustus expected 3 divisions of 25,000 men each from the Southern Confederation cities and the northern cities, more from the industrial and mining cities, farms, ranches, and towns, and the port cities near the 2 main seas of Korhal to provide the fleet soldiers for the future fleet. These initial armies were composed of true revolutionaries, and they would be the best and most loyal troops in Augustus' hands. Augustus had a lot of work to do, and he realized that his father had completely underestimated the strength of the Federation Army and the ruthlessness of the Tarsinus Federation Senate. They would have to deal with more than just the Federation garrison on Korhal IV, which was decadent due to lack of training and growing corruption. The Federation fleet might not even send a landing force to try to retake Korhal, but simply raze the planet to the ground. Korhal was the first planet to rebel, and it was destroyed in ashes. At this time, Augustus's headquarters only had a few financial officers and staff officers temporarily transferred from the family business and the Korhal Revolutionary Army. Lisa Cassidy, a member of the Heavenly Demons, was sorting documents beside the clacking automatic typewriter. Rocket soldier Connor Ward was temporarily appointed as the leader of Augustus's personal guard because of his taciturnity and down-to-earth work. As for Hanak and Zinder, Augustus sent them to the Stealing Guards, which was being formed in the city of Stealing, to serve as instructors. The Mengsk family bought a large number of deserted islands and abandoned starports on the sea as training grounds for new recruits. The Terran Federation would soon find something strange, but they were busy negotiating with the defeated Kel-morian Combine at this time, using the fleet to plunder colonial resources and deterrents. When the negotiations were almost over, Korhal IV was also going to declare independence. It is worth mentioning that Hanak and Zinder had completely different ways of training their subordinates. Hanak was keen on using corporal punishment, swearing and stricter discipline to establish his authority. Xander was relatively easygoing, but he was also very strict with his subordinates. He also cherished the opportunity given to him by Augustus, and realized that this was a turning point that changed his destiny. Augustus' desk was piled with documents and lists of plans, which were just handed to him by his father Angus. The top plan was instigating uprisings in Antigua, Chatsera, Marcera and other places and plan on uniting various planets to form a pan-Terran alliance. Below were a series of ideas such as creating independent newspapers and media on Korhal, infiltrating the creation family of Tarsinus, and controlling members of the Federation Parliament through bribery and coercion. Augustus' first plan was to seize Korhal by force, and then to defend it at all costs, using all means to delay or prevent the Federation from pacifying Korhal in 2491. In order to deal with the worst possibility, Augustus also had an alternative plan to gradually transfer Korhal civilians to Eumogen and marginal territories. Of course, the premise of all this is that they can withstand the fleet of the Terran Federation. In Augustus's view, this was almost a revolution doomed to fail, and the power of both sides was not proportional at all. Augustus knew that Angus's thinking was too simple. His father was a politician with a sharp political mind and a staunch reformer. But he had never been to the battlefield, and overestimated the bottom line of the federal government. Angus knew that there would be a war, but he did not expect that the Tarsinus Council would order the fleet to use nuclear bombs to destroy the planet in high altitude orbit after Korhal IV was completely out of its control. Korhal IV is still a pearl among the 13 main star worlds of the Terran Federation. Even if the federal government's dominance on this planet is declining, senior officials and parliamentarians can still make a lot of money. But after the Battle of Kalian, the Terran Federation will obtain almost all of Kel-morian's colonies and mining guilds, which makes them no longer attach as much importance to Korhal's tax revenue as in the past. Compared with the brutal war after independence, it is easy to clear the federal army on Korhal, because the number of garrisons is not large. In the early days of the Terran Federation, the number of garrisons that the Tarsinus government could send to each Confederation planet was limited. Although the Federation Congress was trying to remove this limit by amending the law, the war with the Kel-morian Combine forced them to invest more troops and resources in the protracted war. Angus, through his lobbying and speeches, repeatedly vetoed Senator Korhal IV's proposal to send more garrisons to Tarsinus to protect people's property. The leader of the creation family despised the aristocratic system that gave him power and wealth, and stood firmly on the side of the people. He wanted to establish a democratic republic, which would undoubtedly make the nobles jump up and down. This was obviously contrary to the wishes of the powerful people who gained power on Korhal IV with the support of the federal government and the vested interests under this system. They hated Angus, and feared that he would take away their power, wealth and status. From the data on paper, the Terran Federation only had 2 army groups stationed on Korhal IV, with about 80,000 people, scattered in various military camps and outposts. They still use the old CMC-200 power weapons and E-type electromagnetic guns. Most of them are new recruits who have not experienced actual combat, and a considerable number of them are old-timers who are about to retire, but have never fought a war. Like Korhal IV, a core planet of the Federation, that is quite far away from the Kel-morian mother planet Moria, the Federation army on it can only deal with riots and eliminate rebels in local areas. Compared with the frontline troops who shed blood in the brutal Battle of the Kalian and have to worry about their lives at all times, being stationed on a planet far away from the war is simply an easy job like a vacation. It is common for officers to accept gifts and mansions to provide protection for the rich and nobles. Some people have been stationed on Korhal IV for more than 10 years, and it is common for them to go in and out of the nobles' balls and high-end places. Once Angus declares Kar independent, Augustus's army will immediately occupy the planet. Thank you for the reward from I Just Miss You, and the reward from Blue Dot Fish. Thank you for just missing you, Kang, Ming, Fleet Idol Naka-chan, Coughing to Death, Nemo, Book Friend 202102231201191122. The wind blows sand all over my face. Blue Dot Fish, Northern War Wolf, Fear Comes from Fantasy. King Di Kyangai Junbu Jian, Book Friend 161,121,213,935,249's monthly ticket. Chapter 95 Yumoyan Ghost Agent. On Christmas Eve, the city of Steeling was like a shining gem in the dark night. Devout Christians rushed to the churches named after the Virgin Mary or the Apostles to attend the service. When the bells rang, the Steelings sat around the sizzling ovens and holographic Christmas trees in their homes to open gifts. The Mengsk family's holiday estate on the edge of the northern mountains was brightly lit. Servants wearing Santa hats celebrated the festival with their employers. Laser detectors swept across the courtyard in the house every few tenths of a second, and Umoyan's intelligent drones patrolled back and forth in the sky like night owls. In the martial arts studio, training swords and sharpened iron swords were placed on the knife racks. On the wall were warning quotes left by Augustus' grandfather of the same name. One of them was the one Augustus recited repeatedly when he was a child. An upright man should fight for the oppressed, and a true king should protect his loyal people. Augustus, wearing a white training robe, was practicing swordsmanship with his swordsmanship instructor. Both parties held a wooden cross broadsword with a guard, which was the sword of the Korhal Lancers in the colonial era. After the salute, Augustus spun the wooden sword in his hand, stepped his feet apart, and stood firmly on the wooden floor like a mountain, while his swordsmanship instructor maintained the same posture as him. "Do you remember what I taught you?" Augustus' swordsmanship instructor was a middle-aged man with an Asian face and dark pupils. Augustus Mengsk, the 8th month of the 12 months is named after him. He is upright and brave, not vain, and born to walk on the path of greatness and glory, Augustus said, staring at his instructor's eyes and the hand holding the sword. "Do you still remember the words he left you?" the instructor asked. "Defend lofty ideals or fight for the oppressed. A noble person always stands firmly in front of tyrants who rule the weak. Those who abuse power will be punished by heaven and earth, and upright people will not stand idly by and allow such evil to exist." Augustus replied, "Your character has proven that you will be the Lord of Korhal." The mentor said, "You and your father are both true Mengsks. What about Arcturus?" Augustus asked. "No, he is not that kind of person," the mentor said. Augustus gathered his strength and was ready to swing his polished blade forward at any time. But his mentor turned the blade in an instant and slashed at Augustus at a tricky angle. The latter easily blocked it after a beautiful turn. The two white figures slashed, blocked, rotated, and stabbed forward. Your reaction, speed, and strength are not as good as before. You should have been a lion of Korhal or a wolf of Stilling that I trained, but now, you are so weak that you are not even as good as a 60-year-old man." The mentor used a powerful blow to make Augustus retreat several steps. Even in the military camp, you should not relax your requirements for yourself. "I'm too lazy," Augustus panted, his growing gray hair drooping on his forehead due to sweat. "I'm weak because I neglected practice." "Then you should redouble your efforts until you can easily knock me down again." In the memory of the aging elder, Augustus began to follow him to learn kendo, politics and philosophy when he was 6 years old. When he was a child, Augustus was not as strong as his brother, but he was very hard-working and persistent, and he also showed amazing talent in learning. Augustus was excellent in all aspects, but he used to be arrogant and conceited, which was also the reason why he entered the rebellious period too early. However, although the instructor was puzzled by Augustus's decline in kendo, he had undoubtedly washed away the lead and became steady and restrained. Augustus waved the training sword in silence, and he was gradually regaining his past feelings. In his memory, Augustus was able to hit his mentor's vital points with one blow or knock down his opponent's sword with his strong physique when he was 16 years old. He was proficient in using more than a dozen cold weapons and hot weapons, and could knock down a defensive adult man in a few seconds with his bare hands. For nearly 10 minutes, Augustus kept slashing or blocking until there was a knock on the door of the martial arts studio. The person who came in was Connor Ward, carrying a Gauss rifle on his back. There was a black skull on his exposed forearm. "Augustus, Umoyan Ambassador Erin Pasteur is looking for you. He should have stayed in Umoyan, reunited with his family." Augustus saluted to his mentor and put the training sword on the rack. "Why not invite him in? He is followed by a Umoyan soldier." Ward said, "That man makes me feel uncomfortable. Since Erin brought him here, it doesn't matter." Soon, Erin Pasteur, still wearing a dark suit, walked in with a blonde young man in a tight light blue combat uniform. The circuits sewn inside the thin combat uniform fibers like trouser lines emitted a silvery white light. "Augustus, this is the warrior you want." Aelin looked at Augustus proudly. "A powerful seeker, a super warrior. Very good, but why is there only one?" Augustus looked at the seeker Aelin mentioned and found that he had long curly golden hair, deep eye sockets, a high nose bridge, and a pair of light blue eyes that showed a melancholy look and looked listless. "We have very few seekers, and most of them have to serve as mentors for new students. But don't worry, there are 3 more outstanding shadow warriors who will come to Korhal IV in January next year. Eileen said to him with a smile. In Imogen, people don't think that Seekers are aliens. We call these brave warriors shadow guards because they are the shadows guarding the elected parliament and the people. Nice to meet you. I am. Augustus did not show the fear and disgust that a Terran usually has towards Seekers, but walked over and shook hands with the other party. Although Augustus wanted a psychic who was loyal to him alone, all the trained psychics in the Terran Federation were controlled by the federal government, so he could only settle for the second best and solve the upcoming ghost agent assassination first. Augustus Mengsk, fighter for freedom. Wolf Mengsk, military leader of the revolution. The shadow guard said, I can see your bright and great heart. No, I'm just an ordinary person. Augustus was about to ask the other party's name, but the latter had already spoken. We only have one name, that is Shadow Guard. He then smiled again. Of course, you can call me Malchus. This is my name when I was in Tarsinus. Malchus, thank you for coming here from afar to protect me and my family. Augustus paused, and the other party expressed his inner doubts again. You are curious about my psychic level, because the Federation's assassins will most likely be at the highest level of 10. Marcus said, in terms of the Federation C psychic assessment level, I should only be level 8, but I brought a psychic shielding force field generator and a laser anti-stealth device specifically for dealing with psychics. Sorry, I think you should wait for me to say what I want to say, otherwise it will sound like you are talking to yourself. Augustus smiled and said, I have another question. I heard that psychics are mind readers. So, I'm curious how much of other people's thoughts you can detect. Generally speaking, we can only perceive superficial emotional fluctuations, such as what you are about to say, and what you are about to do. Marcus replied, if you want to understand the deepest thoughts, it can be done, but it takes a lot of time. People are complicated, and you will never be able to understand all of a person's thoughts. You don't have to worry about me exploring your thoughts. The psychic shielding device we brought can block telepathy, that is, mind reading. Suddenly, he laughed. You thought of torturing corrupt officials and identifying traitors and dissidents in the Revolutionary Army. It's good that you didn't assassinate or massacre them. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96 Phoenix Project. There are 214 servants and 156 security personnel in the White Castle. Shadow Guard, I need you to find out which of them are loyal to the Mengsk family. It was 7 PM on Christmas Eve. Augustus changed into a casual uniform and took Shadow Guard Marcus and Umoyan Ambassador Aylin Pasteur to the banquet hall of the family villa. They walked in the dome corridor with carved railings on the outside. In the center of the hall below the railing was a giant Christmas tree decorated with gifts. This giant fir tree originated from the marginal planet Brassis. That's hard to say. Some people may just want to beg for food and may not be loyal. Eileen said. In addition to the loyal ones, there are the disloyal ones who need to be eliminated immediately. Augustus said, the spies will be tortured and the others will be replaced. Only those who are loyal to the Mengsk family can continue to stay. How are you going to deal with the traitors? Eileen asked. Interrogate and then throw them into the sea. Augustus said. You are so kind. Shadow Guard Marcus was a taciturn man most of the time, and he would only occasionally give his own sharp comments on certain things. Start cleaning up the internal personnel now, Eileen asked. The sooner the better. Augustus walked down a mahogany staircase and asked the Shadow Guard, how long will it take? Do you want me to gather everyone? No need to be so troublesome. The Shadow Guard, who was only wearing combat uniform, blended into the surrounding environment after a distortion of light and shadow. I will give you a list later. By the way, I will test the defense level here. I won't disturb those who are laughing. This is a beautiful night. I can see those laughing souls. Marcus is always gentle and poetic. Eileen said to Augustus, in the words of the old people, he is a Umoyan bard. I will prepare a Christmas present for him. Augustus shrugged. I'm a little surprised. Marcus doesn't seem to have a helmet. How can his head be invisible? Imogen's refractive stealth combat suit can create an invisible force field that can cover the head. Our psychic warriors will rely more on technology to fight, rather than relying on psychic power and body. Aelin explained. At the same time, we must also use some devices to suppress their psychic power, to reduce the possibility of losing control. Many people think that psychics are born super soldiers. Psychics above level 8 can easily turn an ordinary person's brain tissue into paste or crush the grenade hanging on the waist of an enemy soldier with their telekinesis from dozens of yards away, he said. But the more powerful the psychic, the heavier the psychological pressure. This kind of pressure is beyond our understanding. It is said that every time a psychic kills a person, part of the other party's memory and thoughts will be imprinted in his mind. Unless these memories are erased every once in a while, they will soon collapse. They should not become killers. Augustus said. Psychics are born extraordinary. They either become experimental subjects of scientists, or become gods or saints worshipped on ignorant and backward planets. Aelin shook his head. They are different from birth, and cannot become the kind of people they want to be. Psychic power is innate. It is hard to say whether it is a gift or a curse of fate. Psychics should be protected by the government. They will be the guardians of order, rather than the killers used by the rulers to eliminate dissidents. Augustus said. Be careful, young Mengsk. Aelin said. If psychics are left alone, they will inevitably become a new ruling class in the distant future. The power of psychics comes from talent, but it has nothing to do with his mind, and whether he is good or evil. A powerful psychic can even control the minds of others, and those with ulterior motives will use this to establish cults and create evil gods. Rulers need to be wary of the emergence of such people, but also desire to obtain this terrible power, he said. This is one of the reasons why the federal government trains seekers to become ghost agents. It is better to control seekers and train them into weapons than to let them become unstable factors. Our outstanding agents who worked in Tarsinus in the early years investigated their Ghost Academy. The first batch of seekers who entered the Ghost Academy became experimental subjects. They were locked in electrified cages like wild beasts and became lunatics or psychopaths. Those who survived became the first ghost agents. But the fate of Umoyan seekers is completely different. Seekers are neither superhuman nor gods. They also have their own emotions and pursuits. In other words, even the most ruthless federal psionic agents may have thought about saving others. Maybe we can incite some federal ghost agents to defect. Augustus said this as he walked down the stairs and into the hall with a huge Christmas tree. Unless we raid the Ghost Academy in Tarsinus, we won't even see the Federation ghost agents. Arlen's cold joke was hardly funny, but you know that's suicide. You seem to be sure that there will be psychic agents to assassinate Angus, but why would they do that? Killing him will only make the people of Korhal more angry, because the Federation Parliament and the creation family behind them are accustomed to ruling their people with cruelty. The nobles above believe that, as long as they kill the leaders of the rebels, they can eliminate all budding rebellions. If the mob loses their leader, it will be nothing more than a pile of loose sand. Augustus walked past a laughing maid and walked towards his family. How arrogant. Arlen laughed. Augustus' father Angus finally put down his work and stayed with his family to prepare for the arrival of Christmas. These days, Angus and Augustus have talked many times, sometimes until late at night. Since then, Augustus has understood his father's true thoughts. As early as 20 years ago, Angus's revolutionaries began to operate on various planets in the star zone. From this, he learned that on many main star worlds and marginal planets, hundreds of millions of people were dissatisfied with the high-pressure rule of the federal government. During the Guild War, this dissatisfaction gradually evolved into hatred and resentment, and rebellions continued. By this year, no matter how the federal government used news media such as UN to whitewash the peace, it could not cover up the fact that there were rebellions everywhere. The colonies of the Terran Federation are really numerous compared to the Kel-morian Federation and Umoyan, and the increasingly corrupt government can only use high-pressure policies to maintain its rule. The powerful Terran Federation seems to be extremely powerful, but in fact it has many internal contradictions. Angus believes that the Terran Federation has expanded too fast, like a high-pressure furnace that explodes at the touch, or a tower made of playing cards. If you draw a few rows in the right place, the tower will collapse quickly. On the surface, the victory of the Guild War will undoubtedly expand the territory of the Federation, but the Kel-morian planet will only make the rule of the Federation more unstable. But in just a few years, the Federation will drive all the Kel-morians back to Moria and consolidate their rule. And the time when the war just ended was exactly when the federal government's rule was the weakest. So Angus thought that this was the best time to launch a revolution. Once Korhal took the lead in declaring independence, those planets that had long been dissatisfied would revolt under the instigation of the revolutionaries, and eventually the revolutionary upsurge would sweep the entire Terran Federation. But when the Terran Federation consolidates their rule on the planet Kel-morian and completely annexes the mining guilds of the Federation will become a more terrifying behemoth. Angus didn't want to wait any longer. He was aging, and his influence on Korhal was the greatest in the past decade, so he thought that now was the best time to declare independence. When the federal government can free up its hands to suppress Korhal's revolutionaries and station more troops, the planet will never turn over. Old Mengsk felt that his body was aging, and neither of his two sons wanted to take over his career. Angus didn't know how long he could live. Just as Augustus worried, his enemies had hired professional killers and retired soldiers to assassinate him more than a dozen times. He didn't know when he would die in the future. A family that was incompatible with the class that gave it wealth and power would inevitably be excluded. The federal government only needed to disband Senator Korhal, and Angus would lose power. Maybe 5 or 10 years later, the Mengsk family would have disappeared. He also knew that revolutions always cost countless blood and sacrifices. But if the first person who dared to shout for the revolution did not stand up, the people of the entire Korhal sector would always live under the shadow of the Terran Federation. Angus believed that the revolution would not last too long. As long as the entire star region knew that a planet had separated from the Federation and became independent, other planets would follow suit, and the entire Terran Federation would fall into chaos. By then, Kel-morian would inevitably tear up the peace treaty to regain lost territory, and Kel-morian had already stood on Korhal's side. Augustus knew that the actual situation was not much different from what Angus said. The uprisings on various planets of the Federation had never stopped after Korhal's independence, and the rebellion had exhausted the government army. But Angus did not have the opportunity to realize his plan. According to the original storyline, after Angus declared Korhal's independence in 2489, his fanatical supporters and troops swept across Korhal. But only 2 weeks later, the ghost agent of the Terran Federation brutally beheaded Angus. After this, the Federation thought that Korhal's rebellion would disappear with the death of its leader, so it was not in a hurry to retake the planet. However, Korhal's revolutionaries regrouped under the leadership of Angus's son Arcturus, so it was not until nearly a year later, in 2491, that the Federation Congress ordered the use of nuclear bombs to destroy Korhal. Although Augustus agreed with some of his father's views, he did not think that Korhal IV could hold out for 3 months under the offensive of the Federation army. Augustus used a star map with the population, the number of garrisons and the number of fleets to prove to Angus that, even if the military strength was compared, it would be extremely difficult for Ka to win, and the quality of their army could hardly surpass the elite forces of the Federation. Establishing a loyal revolutionary army was only a transition, and Ka must have a fleet of its own. In Augustus's plan, the Ka War of Independence was roughly divided into 3 steps. The first step was to seize Ka IV and immediately declare the planet to be in a state of war and a wartime supply system, using the powerful manufacturing capacity of this industrial planet to provide supplies and weapons for the war. At this time, Augustus already had some small fleets transformed into assault ships, light cruisers and even self-destructing airships, and Kel-morian would also provide some warships. The second step was that after declaring independence, Augustus would personally lead the assembled fleet to raid the Delarian and Bennett shipyards of the Terran Federation and seize the battle cruisers in them. During this period, Ka IV would become a bait to attract the attention of the Federation fleet, a sacrifice. Korhal IV must build an orbital defense platform in the shortest possible time and build city-like anti-aircraft missile towers and missile interception arrays on the far side of the two moons to delay the attack of the enemy fleet. The Korhal Revolutionary Army must build solid fortresses and defense positions on the ground, turning Korhal into a fortress planet and a cruel meat grinder to consume the Federation's landing forces so that they can barely hold Korhal. In the third step, Augustus's fleet will go straight to Tarsinus and force the enemy fleet to return for support. After that, the Korhal Revolutionary Army will abandon the devastated Korhal, and the remaining Korhal people will be gradually sent in batches to Umoyan or areas far outside the Federation government's control area to establish colonies. Of course, all this is based on the premise that the Federation does not nuclear Korhal. Augustus only mentioned this possibility to Angus in a vague way and tried to convince his father through rigorous logical analysis. Augustus knew that using a nuclear bomb to destroy a planet with a population of tens of millions could not be a decision made by the fleet commander alone, but must be the result of a vote by the Federation Parliament. Therefore, while launching the war, he must use political and propaganda means to force the Parliament to not pass this resolution or revoke this order in the end. In this way, he must control every person who is eligible to vote. This is almost impossible to do, because in addition to the members of the Parliament, every founding family of Tarsinus has one vote, and the oldest family like Tagore even has more votes. But Augustus swore that he would do whatever it takes. After fully considering the cruelty of the federal government, Angus agreed to the plan named Phoenix Plan by Augustus 2 days later. This plan is still quite rough, and the latter is spending a lot of time to improve or add and delete it. The implementation of this plan means that millions or even more people will probably die in Korhal IV, and the beautiful homeland will be destroyed by war. At this time, the old Mengsk standing next to his wife and daughter was looking at Augustus, his dark long hair tied into a ponytail that fell to his shoulders, and the thick eyebrows on his cold grey eyes were relaxed and stretched. Augustus Mengsk had a resolute face and handsome appearance, almost like Augustus' future appearance. Seeing Lisa, the devil of heaven, and others in this spacious hall, Augustus remembered that he would return to the barracks in a few days. He couldn't help but think about how many demons of heaven would continue to follow him after he retired. I can't code anymore. I'm practicing my prestige. Thanks for the tragedy of 11. Links and can't get excited. Universe drifting. Linux Ingayu 999. Ink blue starry night. The wind blows my face full of sand. Wan. Yastuk. I just miss you. Tyrant Fanner. Bees Hay Wheat. On a close eyes. Heartless. Zungs Heosharan. Meechan. Zun Sheo. Nightmare Warrior. Book Friend. 201807272344544656. Book Friend 2020050922212845. Infinite. Horror. Empire Sorrow. Thank you Encounter. Immortalking. And the monthly ticket of Atago's Beloved. Thank you for the reward of missing you. Roaring Face. Sakura Dance Charm. Command Aish. Hans X. Linksio Cloud Bridge. Rang Special Agent. Blue Dot Fish. And I Just Miss You. Thank you for the recommendation ticket and investment. Chapter 97 Invitation Letter from the Creation Family. The headquarters of the Korhal Revolutionary Army installing. Morning of December 28th. The headquarters of the Revolutionary Army is under construction under a skyscraper with a silver frame and bronze glass. This skyscraper, which is about to be completed, belongs to the Mengsk Corporation. This 200-story building has smooth rounded corners and elegant curves, standing among the silver spires and geometric buildings of various styles. Augustus is now in the underground network building called the Mengsk Interstellar Trade Building, about 500 feet deep. His headquarters is a cubic compartment with metallic floors, walls, ceilings and duct fans. As early as 6 years ago, the construction company under the Mengsk Corporation began to build this trade building and secretly constructed its complex underground part as a shelter to deal with a series of doomsday crises such as nuclear war. Now, Augustus has temporarily decided to use this place as the headquarters of the Korhal Revolutionary Army. About 200 Revolutionary Army soldiers who have been certified and stamped by the Imogen Shadow Guard and have checked the loyalty column are doing clerical, staff and guard work in the underground headquarters. Of course, the reason why they were able to enter the headquarters was because Augustus believed that they had absolute faith in the victory of the revolution and a high level of ideological and political awareness. Since the Car Revolutionary Army was far from being a qualified army before, Augustus still had a lot of work to do, including establishing an effective management system and strict military regulations, appointing officers, dividing war zones, and even designing uniforms and symbols of the Revolutionary Army. This was of course impossible for Augustus to accomplish, but fortunately, the Umayan National Defense Army sent a force of about 20,000 middle and low-level officers and military advisors to support the Car Revolutionary Army after Christmas, helping Korhal IV to build an army in the shortest possible time. With his unremitting efforts, Angus also received a promise from the Umayan elected parliament. Once Korhal IV declared war on the Terran federal government, then Umayan and its colonies would send a volunteer army to help the Car Revolutionary Army fight the federal army. The foundries and starship ports of Umayan and its core worlds will provide Korhal IV with 600-foot class cruisers and all the following frigates, destroyers, galaxy supply ships, and access to all military starports of the Protectorate. This is almost unsparing assistance, short of declaring war directly on the Terran Federation. Because the old, but still not foolish members of the Umayan elected parliament understand that, if they cannot weaken the power of the Terran Federation through another war, then they will be swallowed up by the powerful Federation, and lose all sovereignty. With the help of Umayan officers and military advisors, Augustus was much more relaxed. So, Augustus focused on designing the logo and emblem for the Revolutionary Army today. This was originally the work of professionals, but Augustus insisted on doing it himself. In the end, Augustus rejected all the plans and chose the pattern he proposed and asked the designer to draw a powerful arm with a red background and a slender whip around it, holding the whip ring. This is the logo of the future famous Federation resistance organization Sons of Korhal. After the finalization, Augustus sent the logo to the propaganda department and then sat at his desk to review the training progress reports of various recruit training bases. Although Augustus lacked confidence in these Umayan officers, who had never had actual combat experience, he was quite satisfied with the efficiency of these officers who graduated from the military academy in grasping military discipline and training. At nearly noon, Lisa Cassidy brought lunch and red wine to Augustus. When she came, she was wearing the grey trial uniform of the Korhal Revolutionary Army. Just as Augustus was preparing to eat, the holographic projector on his desk lit up. This was his personal habit. He liked to watch some programs while eating. The Un-Universe News Network holographic image TV reported that Mrs. Augustus Mengsk, the leader of the Korhal IV Mengsk family, and her youngest daughter Miss Dorothy were taking a galaxy shuttle to Telada 9th for vacation. This scene lasted less than 3 seconds, and then the TV host began to spend a lot of time and words to talk about Mrs. Mengsk's contribution to the welfare of children in Korhal IV and the problem of war refugees at the level of Acquire. However, the real Mrs. Mengsk and Dorothy Mengsk had already flown to Umajan on Christmas Day in Umajan's stealth fighter. By this day, Augustus had received news from a line pastor that the mother and daughter had arrived safely. Before leaving, Augustus confiscated all of Dorothy's little skirts and ordered her not to play with her young nephew Valerian. But he could do nothing about his mother. Poor Valerian had never seen his grandmother and aunt in his life, but Augustus changed history. It doesn't matter, the tradition of the Mengsk family must still be inherited. Augustus was enjoying steak and red wine, while thinking about how the journalists who were keen on criticizing the extravagance and corruption of the nobles commented on the extravagance of the Mengsk family. However, such articles often only appeared on the largest social and news website of the Terran Federation, Federation Battle Flag, and would be permanently banned after less than 10 seconds. Perhaps a considerable number of those who dared to tell the truth would stand on Augustus' side, because they always liked to pursue the truth that was covered up. Unconsciously, Augustus had made it his biggest goal in life to overthrow the Terran Federation and protect his family. Next, the news channel broadcast some news about the various territories of the Federation. Andaza, the capital of Antigua Prime, was hit by large-scale harassment again, and the conflict caused several deaths. This city with decades of resistance tradition was once suppressed by the Marines, and the conservative estimate of the death toll reached several thousand, but no one mentioned this in the retrospective report. Only the leaders of the Revolutionary Army like Augustus got the real record of that year. Then came some insignificant news, such as the earthquake on Terran III and the large-scale reduction in the yield of Marcera crops due to insufficient irrigation water, followed by an advertisement for child star Kel Villas. Augustus knew that there were too many riots and disturbances in many places in the Korhal sector for the UN to broadcast, but they seemed to ignore this kind of hard-won big news on weekdays. When Augustus was thinking about how to sneak into the UN headquarters building and broadcast some massacre truths that would undermine the prestige of the federal government and scandals that would shame the Tarsinus founding family to the entire universe, his personal terminal vibrated. This was an email asking him to return to Meinhof on the first Saturday of next month. While serving as the leader of the Korhal Revolutionary Army, Augustus was still a lieutenant in the Federation Marine Corps, a war hero who defended the Terran Federation. Augustus silently thought about the danger of returning to the barracks. At present, only a small number of the Revolutionary Army's senior officials knew his identity. These people had been strictly examined and tested before they were allowed to enter the core of the Revolutionary Army. In the end, Umoyan's shadow guards also proved that, although some people were suspected of using the revolution to speculate and gain power and interests, at least no one betrayed. Therefore, the possibility that the Federation knew his true identity was extremely low. A few minutes later, another email was sent to Augustus' personal mailbox, containing 2 invitations, one inviting him to give a speech at the Tarsinus Noble Military Academy as a combat hero, and the other inviting him to attend the 140th birthday celebration of Andrea Tagore, the mistress of the Tarsinus creation family Tagore family, as the commander of the heavenly demon and the heir of the Mengsk family. And judging by the elegant, but condescending tone of the letter, it seems that Augustus's participation in this celebration is his obligation. This invitation must be based on absolutely rational political considerations. The wave of Korhal's call for independence is sweeping the entire planet and has already affected other worlds in the Federation. At this time, if Augustus appeared in Tarsinus as the heir of Mengsk and a combat hero, then the federal government can use this to spread propaganda, creating the illusion that the Mengsk family has not yet betrayed the creation family class, weakening Angus's prestige and minimizing the impact of the Korhal riots. There may be more complex political considerations. For example, the creation family is likely to test Augustus' attitude towards his father. After all, they already know that they are not in harmony, and Augustus is joining the Federation Marine Corps regardless of his father's position is the best evidence. If he can break with his father, then Augustus will become a pawn for them to control the Mengsk family in Korhal. Then Augustus will get a sword called Frostmourne and inherit his father. Going to Tarsinus is of course very dangerous, but Augustus must deal with these mysterious creation families in advance. He urgently wants to know which creation families are likely to stand on the side of Korhal, which are likely to remain neutral, and which are hopeless and must be wiped out. The bell of the new year has arrived, and Korhal IV in January 2489 is still as warm as before. This planet has long springs at all latitudes, and stealing is even more like spring all year round. This is a garden world that is extremely suitable for human habitation. This month, the political situation within the Terran Federation is different from the past. Most of the people on the main star world are immersed in the joy of victory, while the Terrans in the war zone and marginal colonies are still starving and freezing. Angus's revolutionaries have bases of varying sizes on various planets. In marginal areas far away from the federal government, the revolutionaries have greater control. Therefore, they know that the war is not over unless the federal government allocates funds to help refugees and help them rebuild their homes. However, the federal government has been slow to respond and is still focusing on signing a peace treaty with the Kel-morian Federation and stepping up its plunder of its land and rich resources. The Revolutionary Army often appears as a savior, which makes their influence on many marginal worlds far greater than other worlds. Angus and Augustus both believe that their focus should be on planets far away from the core worlds to win their support. Augustus temporarily put aside the construction of the Revolutionary Army and handed it over to Acton Field, the former Mengsk family security captain who was newly appointed as the colonel of the Revolutionary Army, and several military advisors sent by Umoyan. At the stilling skyport, he and Lisa and others took a spaceship back to the Heavenly Demons base in Meinhof. Other tasks such as accepting human aid materials and speeding up the transformation of civilian ships into warships were all handled by the Mengsk group, and his father Augustus Mengsk would take over these things personally. Augustus Mengsk, who was getting busier and busier, had already shown signs of hair loss, which made his son Augustus very worried about his future image. It was not until 3 days later that Augustus arrived at Meinhof. By the time he got there, most of the fleet had already left the planet. There was only the Behemoth-class battlecruiser Iron Justice and 2 Leviathan-class battleships, but Meinhof had already implemented military control. Due to the cold management of the Federal Army, riots and rebellions broke out in many places, but there was no riot in the town of New Apollo where the Heavenly Devils were stationed. Raynor was a talented person with a talent for leadership. The Heavenly Devils were willing to obey his command, but he was not good at managing industries. The crystal mines and factories were managed by Rickid and Titus Finley. The former received an aristocratic elite education and learned how to manage factories, while the latter became shrewd and hardworking, only because he managed a treasure pod that made a fortune every day. Augustus returned to the military camp on January 7th. As soon as he left the starport, he immediately contacted his old boss Warfield and learned that his retirement application had not been approved yet, but he was helping Augustus deal with this matter. After all, without violating the bottom line, Warfield was willing to open a back door for Augustus. Afterwards, Augustus summoned all the Heavenly Devils and gathered all those who were wandering outside and on duty together. He explained to them that he was about to retire and decided to return to Korhal. Everyone was surprised, but they could more or less guess what Augustus was going to do. Even out of trust, Augustus could not directly say that he was going back to kill the Terran Federation, but asked who was willing to retire with him and go to Korhal, to the place that was becoming more and more chaotic in the news reports. The first squad of the Heavenly Devils immediately responded to Augustus. Unlike the other squads that were later assigned to Augustus, except for Titus Finley, they had already learned that Augustus was going back to rebel. Xander, Ward, and Hanek had nowhere to go and did not want to stay in the army. As for Amy, Brandon, and Ilya Kulovsky, they originally wanted to return to their hometown after retirement, but since Augustus still needed them, they would stay by his side. Rickid originally wanted to develop in the army for a while, but he soon realized that the Revolutionary Army was the place where he could realize his life value. Josephine was very hesitant. It was not that he was a car nobleman and was born to stand on the opposite side of the revolutionaries. It was just that he happened to have several children in Kar, and the mothers of the children happened to be the daughters of the great nobles of Kar. What was very coincidental was that the mothers of the children were not the same person. If someone had not bought Josephine's hands and feet from the gangs of the Holsterling, he would not have run away. After thinking it over, Josephine decided to go back in a mask. Lundstein keenly realized that if he followed Augustus now, he would not have to overthrow his family, and he could also make Lundstein the core family that the new regime would rely on, and the future upstart. But this was also a gamble, and in the end he chose to follow Augustus first. Only Lipachinayan and Tixfinley did not respond. The former was ready to go home and find a stable job as an engineer, and the latter had saved enough money and was ready to live a carefree life for a year or two, and then come out to make a living when he ran out of money. Renault was also undecided at first, because he didn't know how to tell his parents about this. But soon, the words revolution, uprising, and upholding justice soon took effect, and he immediately realized that this was what he wanted to do. The other squads were more hesitant. Among the 32 people, including the second squad leader and the third squad leader, only less than 10 people were willing to leave the army and leave this place that gave them honor. Despite this, Augustus was still very satisfied. Those who were willing to follow Augustus now would undoubtedly become the first batch of direct officers under him. Thanks to Mackie Zero, Perfect Mystery Ava, Camouflaged Wooden Man, to Lazy to Remember the Name, Luohonglogy, Bookfriend 201908292216174116, Misaka Misakeo, Taishang Sheng Shengling Ming's Engine, starring 1, The Unkillable Little Hero, Book friend 150,922,091,529,656. Agent Rangrong. AIUR will be redeemed. Shenzixi. Cosmic drifting. Hanky scars. The little black room welcomes you. Black Cell Christ Ball. Book friend. 150,815,122,226,329. Urge Team Zhao Qiang. God of Tricks. Book friend 150,105,153,217,605 for the monthly ticket. Thanks to book friend 201705221335101157 for the reward. Chapter 9 Augustus's Wish. Lieutenant Colonel Warfield's flagship Iron Justice, on the ship's corridor from the crew cabin to the mid-spine deck, January 10, 2489. For Augustus, who was worried about the fate of Korhal IV, he could not communicate with the Korhal Revolutionary Army light years away in a battle cruiser where all signals could be intercepted and monitored. But fortunately, Augustus did not have to stay in the army for too long. Warfield promised Augustus that he could get his wish and leave in 2 weeks at the latest, and bluntly said that this was the same as Arcturus's style of retiring before the war was won. Augustus, Raynor, Hanak and Rigkid, the best sniper of the Heavenly Demon, were walking towards the ship's bar in brown tweed uniforms. Their uniforms were very different from the black tights worn by the fleet soldiers they met during the period, both in terms of material and color. Neither side gave each other a good look, but due to the stricter soldier regulations on the ship, they would not fight each other after drinking a little like before. Compared with the Marines and the planetary surface army, the proportion of resocialized soldiers in the fleet soldiers is much higher. If before the transformation, these resocialized soldiers were all devilish criminals, after the internal surgery transformation, they became docile sheep, law-abiding, honest and pure. The aggressive Hanak found it difficult to anger these resocialized soldiers, even if they also had expressions including confusion and anger, but their restraint was quite amazing. The Marines are different from the fleet soldiers, who are stationed inside the warships. They don't stay inside the warships for too long. They are more likely to take the spare ships in the fleet to perform combat missions. During the Kalian War, there were more than one incident in which the battle cruisers kicked the Marines temporarily on board the warships when performing emergency missions, leaving the 4th class Marines to stay on the godforsaken planets or asteroids waiting for the next flight. Some unlucky teams were even forgotten forever. After Augustus greeted several smiling resocialized soldiers, they walked into the small and simply decorated bar of the Iron Justice and ordered a few beers and fried chicken to while away this boring and long day. It was the 3rd day since Augustus returned to Meinhof New Apolloan, and a government official from Tarsinus took over the New Apolloan mine with a group of civilian staff. The Heavenly Devils returned to the fleet in the planet's synchronous orbit, ready to carry out the next mission. This meant that the good days of the Heavenly Devils earning extra income by wrestling the Adene crystals in the mines were over. Despite this, when Augustus received the payment from Titus for the crystals sold in a month, even a quarter of the total amount was nearly 80 million credits. The rest of the Heavenly Devils got half of it, and Titus finally got a quarter because of his connections and hard work. Even so, Raynor and others became rich. They no longer worried about money, but they also remembered who gave them all this. This money is enough for Augustus to become a rich man. If he were an ordinary person, he might choose to spend 3 to 5 million to buy a private interstellar yacht and fly to Telederath. Then, Augustus would hire a construction team to build a beautiful manor in the warm and charming near equatorial rainforest, marry a gentle wife, have a few more children, and form a football team. But Augustus knew that, even if he really did that, such a happy life would not last long in the Caprulu sector, where the war was about to start. The Federation, the Zerg, the Protoss, the UED, who can guarantee that the planet, where Augustus lives will not suddenly become a scorched silicon crystal or a hotbed covered with fungal blankets and nourishing alien monsters one day. If Augustus wants to live a stable life, he must solve all threats to mankind and establish a unified regime. As far as Augustus's revolutionary cause is concerned, this is just a small amount of money, which can only arm a small-scale force, and it is just a drizzle to use on the fleet. Augustus' time in the army was running out. There were several places on his schedule to go, including Tarsinus and Raynor's hometown Shylock. While arranging Raynor's family, Augustus also planned to visit Omo's family because he heard that Omo was the only son in the family. Raynor's parents were still alive at this time, but by 2499, when the story of StarCraft I began, he was already alone. Augustus didn't know what Raynor's parents had experienced. They were still young, and the truth might be closer to hunger and disease. For Augustus at this time, since he had the ability to prevent all this from happening, he didn't mind spending time and energy to help his friend Raynor. Now it seems that my parents didn't use the money I gave them. Raynor sighed as usual today, very frustrated. The last time I video called my dad, I found that he had become thinner than before. First the bonus, then the money from the last batch of arms we sold, and the crystals sold in New Apollo, a total of 3 times. They must not have spent a penny. They must not have used the unidentified money to at least buy some food. He said, "Your dad and mom are really weird, Jim. They are starving to death. Who cares whether the money is from unknown sources?" Hanek said, "My parents taught me, when I was very young, that a person should use the money earned by his own hard work to support himself. Unearned money is ill-gotten gains." Renault said dejectedly, "I should have known that the excuse of picking up money along the way is totally untenable. Damn it, how can you listen to the idiot Hanek?" Rick Kidd said angrily. "Jim must have been drunk when he sent the money." Augustus shook his head. "Remember what I told you? Someone in Tarsinus is going to invite me to an old lady's birthday party. The higher-ups must have received some notice and directly approved me a 2-week vacation. I guess they won't let me retire easily before I go to Tarsinus." Augustus said, "I told Warfield that I want to take a squad of heavenly devils to Tarsinus, and he agreed. It takes half a star zone to get from Meinhof to Tarsinus. We can stay in Shylock for a day," he said. "Shylock is not a good place. They can move to Korhal or Umoyan. I will have someone arrange a job for them." "No, Korhal can't go." Raynor immediately shook his head and rejected it. "You know it's about to become the center of the war." Chapter 99. Zayalo Renault's hometown. Chapter 99 Shylock, Raynor's hometown, Meinhof Synchronous Orbital Space Station, Launchport. Augustus and his first squad of heavenly devils were waiting for the interstellar jumper to arrive at Launchport C, and waiting with them was Rory Swan, who he had recently hired to work for the shipyard and technology laboratory of the Korhal Revolutionary Army. "You told me that Korhal IV is facing some little troubles?" Swan said to Augustus, who was standing beside him while waiting. "If you call the revolution a little trouble." Augustus did not hide this from Swan. "Oh, I thought you would say, all we have to do is kick those nobles in the ass and turn their fortunes upside down." Swan was not afraid at all. "You always have the habit of making a very difficult thing sound easy. For example, someone said that Mr. Mengsk is going to pick the sun from the sky today. He would only say, 'Oh, we have to build a pyramid that can reach deep space first,' which is of course a small matter. I don't want to preach to you, Swan." Augustus said, "Sometimes someone has to stand up and inspire people. You know I have to play this role often." "Okay, let's not talk about this. Have you remembered which exit to exit from Stilling Skyport, and what the person who picks you up looks like?" "I'm remembering it," Swan said. "It shouldn't be difficult. I'm not a stupid dwarf. You don't need to remind me again and again." A few days ago, Augustus found Rory Swan, who was unemployed again because of the departure of the Devil of Heaven. Augustus signed a 5-year contract with Swan, giving him a salary of 20 million federal credits, equivalent to 15 million Kel-morian coins, which was enough to support the Swan family until the federal army withdrew. Swan said frankly that after the federal officials took over the New Apolloan mine and factory, the Kel-morians were enslaved by them. They only got very little food every day and lived a slave-like life, which was far worse than when the heavenly devils were still there. Rebellion was a matter of time, but even so, his family was unwilling to leave Meinhof, and Swan decided to follow Augustus to find a job because he needed to earn money to keep his people alive. "My cousins won't go to Korhal for a while, but I'm going to recruit some extra people locally to study the improved version of the Goliath armored robot and design new power armor. Unfortunately, you gave me 2 obsolete prototypes, CMC power armor and electromagnetic guns. Swan suddenly shook his head. I hope those Korhal people can be as reliable as Mrs. Meinhof. Where did you find those treasures? When we were in the Pride of Poker, we met a hapless gang. I suspect they are some wealthy rebel organization. Augustus said to Swan. Is there more than one rebel? Forget it, the more the better. Swan smacked his lips. How about it? Can we get the design drawings of Goliath and power armor through reverse engineering? Augustus was still worried. If we start from scratch, it will take at least a few years, but we, Kel-morian, have been studying these power armor and Goliath armored robots, and some technical difficulties have been overcome. Besides, didn't you say that the Umojans will also send experts? Swan said. The Umojans' reverse engineering is amazing. They must have been able to perfectly replicate power armor and Goliath mechas. Some of my relatives who work outside said that, if the Umojans were given a Federation battle cruiser, they would immediately be able to build an elite fleet. The Umojans are also trying to restore the mysterious alien ruins they found on some planets, and obtain alien technology through reverse engineering. But who knows if these aliens were destroyed millions of years ago, or this is simply a joke of the century. Maybe there really is a group of aliens, who knows? Augustus shrugged. At this time, a large shuttle flew into the port, and Augustus and others waved goodbye to Swan. Good luck, Mr. Swan of Meinhof. Good luck, Boss Mengsk. Swan waved, then sat down in a round chair, and began to feel lost about leaving his hometown. Fate is really strange. A few months ago, he never thought that he would leave his hometown to make a living. Augustus' unreserved trust in Swan's ability was one aspect, and the main reason was that this wealthy boss offered a price that he simply could not refuse. In the end, Rory Swan found himself inexplicably becoming the boss of the weapons research and manufacturing department of the Korhal Revolutionary Army, and he also had several scientific research stations and laboratories under the Mengsk group. At this time, Swan remembered what Augustus had said to him more than once. Swan, you will become a great inventor, think more and learn more, make more friends in weapon design. If the previous sentence makes sense, the latter sentence is not normal. Centerville Town, Shiloh Planet, Terran Federation Territory. From the synchronous orbit, Shiloh is a gorgeous and brilliant orange, with a wide ocean between several main continents. The temperature and water resources suitable for human survival are the main reasons why this planet can become one of the Federation colonies, but Shiloh is not a rich planet. There is a lack of mineral and metal reserves here, and the land is mostly dry areas covered with alkaline peat. Farming here requires double the hard work and sweat. Unlike the prime worlds like Korhal IV, Shiloh was spared from the war due to its lack of features and strategic value, but the people here were starving due to heavy taxes. Maybe we can build a base for the Revolutionary Army here. When Augustus stepped off the rented hovercraft and stepped onto the dark grey land of Shiloh for the first time, he said, the people here are tough and brave, but the important thing is that they are starving. It's getting even more depressed here. Raynor stood behind him, looking at the dome building in Centerville with nostalgia. Many people in this town joined the army, but how many of them can come back? We fought for the Federation, but the Federation made our parents and families starve. And the Revolutionary Army will change all this, Augustus assured him. Then Raynor led Augustus and others to their home. Like many houses in Shiloh, 80 to 90% of the colonial huts here are buried deep underground to avoid the scorching sun and cold winter. At the door of Renault's house, Augustus saw Renault's mother, a woman with green eyes and black hair. She was very thin and her beautiful face was no longer plump. It was this woman who taught Renault to be honest and kind. Carol Renault. Thanks to Donald John, Command Aish. Welcome to the Black Room, Agent Rangrong. Irida, I whisper to you. Xbada, Jihuao Pavilion. Book friend 201711110210260034. Corporal carry out on patrol. Book friend 201807272344546546. BNZ. Silence tone. Zhao Jackson. Please allow me to make a sad expression. Keizingping. Fish _ eminent book. Sloth who loves reading. Harmonious Mark Rabbit Gundam. Aishima Rudeki. Snakeshiang. Hansix. Silly little. I think I can be popular. You, Zin, Silver Dragon Cavalry, Simon DD41, Donald John, 4 Seasons expression for the monthly ticket. Thanks to Donald John, Agent Ran Gran for the reward, and thanks for the recommendation ticket. Chapter 100 The People's Dilemma. Renault's mother, Carol, knew that her son would be back soon, so when she was free, she always stood at the door and looked up at the sky of Shiloh, which was dark due to the sandstorm, even though the bright sun might burn her beautiful light green eyes. Most of the farmland in Centerville has been abandoned. The economic depression, population loss and lack of fuel brought about by the war are the main causes of soil erosion and desert expansion. Although she was frightened by the fierce-looking Titus Finley, Carol did not say much, but smiled and invited Augustus and others into the lobby of the dome house. The soldiers noticed that despite suffering from hunger and poverty, this gentle and beautiful Shiloh woman still kept her home clean and tidy. This small house with the characteristics of Shiloh colonists is a metal and granite building. On the brown walls, there are even fossils of local prehistoric vertebrates and beautiful spiral patterns. There was a small rectangular oak dining table and several chairs in the front hall. These wooden furniture were quite expensive in Shiloh, where there were few vegetation and forests, and were almost as valuable as precious metals. There was a red carpet between the table and a star map of the Kaprulu sector hanging on the wall. It was woven by the hostess of the family. When Carol poured tea for the guests, Renault noticed that there were many fewer pieces of furniture in the house. His father's favorite music box made of Chasselas sunwood was gone, and many old pieces of furniture in his memory seemed to have been erased by time. "Where's Dad?" Renault said while pouring tea for his mother. "He's still working on the farm and is on his way back." "Mrs. Renault, I'm Lieutenant Augustus Mengsk, Jim's superior." Augustus introduced himself to Carol and pointed to the others and said, "These are Jim's classmates. I don't know if Jim told you that he is already the corporal leader of this squad. We are proud of him, sir." Carol handed Augustus a cup of cooled black tea. In Shiloh, which is always extremely hot most of the year, this is a must-have drink for farmers and workers. "Please sit down, gentlemen. Oh, and there's a beautiful lady. Mom, why don't you buy some food with the money I gave you?" Renault helped his mother put the kettle of herbal tea back into the refrigerator. "Did Dad sell the music box? After you left, the government's taxes increased month by month, and the farm suffered a sharp drop in production due to the shortage of genetically modified seeds and fuel for agricultural robots. Even so, Shiloh still has to pay food to the government as a tax is a major agricultural world to supply the troops on the front line. Shit, someone must have embezzled all the food." Jim's mother, "You must not know how we spent our days in the army. We ate shit all day long." Hannock was wearing a civilian outfit of a black jacket and torn dark blue jeans. He cut his hair into a Mohawk-style coxcomb before leaving the barracks. Between Hannock's bald head, the erect dark red hair looked like a brightly colored coxcomb. "Shut up, Hank," Augustus whispered. "At first, we used the salary you sent back to repay the debts we owed. However, the money you sent back later was definitely not what you could get with your rank and military service. They came from unknown sources, and you didn't tell us where you got the money from. Your father and I both think that we shouldn't use them." Carol looked at Hannock for a few seconds, and then retracted her gaze. "We are all very worried about you, child. If you got the money through crime or some other means I don't know, then we must not touch it." Renault was speechless. Although he didn't think it was a crime to make a profit from the spoils, and taking the wealth that would eventually flow to the rich and powerful would not make his conscience hurt, his parents didn't know. "I think there may be some misunderstandings here." Augustus looked at Carol. "Madam, you don't have to worry about the unknown origin of this money, because it was earned by Jim in the war. My soldiers have been rewarded generously for their repeated military exploits, and have the right to dispose of the spoils of war independently, and all of this is what Jim deserves. I learned about the difficulties of the Renault family, so I gave him an extra bonus. He never told you about it, just because of the military's confidentiality regulations." "Really, Jim?" Carol looked at her son. She was half believing and half doubting what Augustus said. In Carol's eyes, Augustus was definitely an excellent soldier. He was young and handsome, and not frivolous at all. He always stood straight like a pine tree, which made it very easy for an older woman to like him. Of course. Raynor nodded quickly. To some extent, what Augustus said was basically the truth. We are the devils of heaven. Many colony worlds are praising our names and great achievements. You never lied to me. But we still can't accept them. They belong to you. We are your parents, not vampires. Carol looked at her son and shook her head. The personalities of the Renault family are very similar. They are very persistent in what they believe in, and are difficult to persuade. I know your concerns. Augustus noticed that there were some opened cans in the kitchen of the Renault family, and realized that the family was using them as staple food. You hope to earn the money you need to live with your own hands, but poverty will eventually destroy your body. Just from the poor quality of the metal packaging, Augustus could imagine that the cans purchased by the Renault family were likely to be cheap smuggled goods when the farm went bankrupt and could not apply for any subsidies. Often the sources of such smuggled cans are very complicated. They may have been stored for more than 10 years and have long expired, deteriorated and bred bacteria, and they also include synthetic foods from black-hearted processing factories in marginal worlds. Smugglers travel between stars to avoid quarantine or to avoid a series of additional qualifications such as food safety production licenses that non-Genesis families need to purchase. They stop at various illegal black ports and sell these smuggled goods to the people at the bottom of this world at incredibly low prices. Eating these canned foods whose quality cannot be guaranteed means taking many risks. Diseased mold can be fatal. In the Korhal sector, although many intractable diseases have been eradicated, there are still more emerging diseases that are incurable. It is very likely that these diseases took the lives of Raynor's parents. This is also the common fate of the people of Shiloh and other colonies. Poor food, poor living conditions, and a bleak future. Augustus realized that the only way to save these people was to reshape this corrupt system. Carol Raynor nodded, and Augustus just hoped that she would listen. Next, Augustus didn't say anything more, leaving more time for Raynor, his mother, and his father who was about to return, and let him convince his family. The spacecraft stayed in Shiloh for a short time, only half a day. Augustus did not have the courage to meet Tom Omo's parents, because he thought Omo's death was his own responsibility. Before the ship was about to set sail for Tarsus, Augustus placed a bouquet of flowers in front of Omo's grave, and stood there for a long time. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.